All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Welcome to the August 22nd Planning Commission meeting. My name is Eric Stevenson, Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, sitting in today for Chairman Davis. To my right is Secretary Chris Ryer. Director, would you please call roll?
Robin Allen is on her way. Marcia Collins.
Present.
Eric Costello is not present. Talib Horn.
Present.
Claudia Jolin.
Present.
Doug McCoach.
Present.
Justin Williams.
Present.
Eric Stevens.
Present.
And Sean Davis is not present today.
Great. First, we've got the approval of our minutes from the August 1st meeting. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes from last meeting?
Move to approve. Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. That brings us to our consent agenda. Item number 3, CIP transfers. We've got meetings from, Board of Estimates meetings from August 7th and August 21st. Additionally, we're gonna pause here. We've got a representative from DPW who's gonna answer some questions from previous agenda items, as well as any of these, if there are questions. So before, I'll invite Kristen up to introduce him. Does anybody have any questions on the transfers in front of us? So Kristen, I did have one. So from the August 8th meeting, agenda item number 1 from DPW is in reference to a $13 million transfer for cost associated with a water main replacement project. And there's a number of contributing factors noted here in the explanation, including inflation, additional repaving, and efforts to increase minority business participation. And so those are understandable, and the minority participation is certainly a good thing, but that's still a staggering number. So I was wondering if we could get a little bit more explanation on that item.
Sure, and I'll just go ahead and defer. This is Garrett Hallback. I believe the Director of Budgeting at Department of Public Works. I'll let him introduce himself, but he prepares the capital budget for Public Works and can answer some of your questions.
Great, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Garrett Hallback from Department of Public Works. So to your question, this is for Project 1283, which is the water main rehab work at Reisterstown Road. So this project was originally budgeted in fiscal 22. In that CIP, it was under 557-126, and the total project cost at that point in time was approximately, I'm going to use round numbers, $13 million.
13 million?
$13 million. When it went out to bid in August of 2023, so 1 year ago, the stated target from the DPW engineers had risen to $18 million at that time. And when we finally got bids and opened those, the low bid that came in, again, just sticking with round numbers here, was about $27 million. So it grew from about 13 to 18 to 27. So a large increase, absolutely.
Do you happen to know? Do you happen to know how many bids we received?
Off the top of my head, I do not, but I believe there were multiple bids on that.
Okay. Did you have anything else to add on that one?
I would just say there's, three reasons that we have talked about, right? One is just the absolutely astronomical increase in the cost of building supplies and chemicals over the past 4 years. It's a huge challenge at DPW that we talk about every day. Two, as we mentioned, the repaving policy that DPW follows. and 3, that this is a unique pilot program to train future general contractors for the city. And when the bids came in from the primes, they were higher, and I believe that was really one of the reasons, is that we're asking the primes to train their future competitors, right? And so I think they wanted a little bit of assurance monetarily, right, to do that work. And so DPW had internal discussions about, whether to take this bid or not. As I said, it advertised a year ago, so it's taken a bit of time to move forward.
That's not that long.
Well, from bid to acceptance, that's a bit of time, longer than we'd like in the contracting procurement side of things. So yeah, for those 3 reasons, this project has gone up in price, and we've seen that with all of our water main projects.
So thank you for that explanation, and I'm going to give my fellow commissioners an opportunity to ask any questions. Part of my concern is from the Planning Commission's perspective in terms of budgeting for capital improvements and prioritizing projects. This is a project that we approved at $13 million. It's now going to cost twice that, and I like to think that it may have fallen differently in the prioritization matrix if we had, understood the actual cost at the time that we were reviewing it. So I guess I'd love for us to continue a conversation about how we can do better, both from a cost control standpoint, but I'm not really here to, micromanage DPW's procurement. My concern is just that we're, setting our capital priorities based on accurate information. So thank you for that. We did have some previous questions on, I think it was before us about 6 weeks ago, and this was related to consulting services for wastewater. I don't have the details in front of me. Have you been briefed on that one?
Not immediately recalling that issue.
That's fine. Since it's not in front of us, I'd love if we could have a follow-up meeting just to sit down and talk through some of these concerns.
Sure. We can have you meet our bureau chief or our procurement officers and talk about that.
That'd be awesome. Are any questions from the commission?
Hi.
Thank you. Just regarding the issue of pre-construction budgeting. Clearly, everything, all costs have gone up over the last 4 years.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if we have a period of time as these contracts are proffered where we're going to see a continuing series of overruns or cost overruns on the projects. And if you're taking, I guess, what are the steps you're taking with regard to scoping and estimating that would then allow you in the future to be a little bit closer to target?
Yeah, that's been a hard conversation to have. We've been talking to our Office of Engineering and Construction about how their engineers come up with things. We also have consulting engineers on hand that do review bids when they come in high for us and give us a second opinion on whether we should be accepting those bids or not. But that's a continuing conversation to be had over how do we get better estimates, right? It's on the BOE website. You can look at the bids that are open for a project and see also in the advertisement what the city engineer believed the cost range was going to be. And we continue to see those, the bids coming in are coming in higher than what the city engineer believed they could be.
So it would
it's a
suggest that
challenge.
the city engineer should be maybe changing their approach and acknowledging more realistic costs.
Yeah, I mean, the methodology that DPW's used for some of the projects doesn't seem to quite align with where the market is.
Right. But what does that mean for a capital budget,
I mean, that means it's tough, right? I mean, I'm on the budgeting side of things. I got to make sure we have a balanced budget and then pay the bills at the end of the day. To date, we have been able to make things work, but obviously when everything comes in high, we have to find other projects that we can either defer or cancel. And, occasionally there is something that comes in low, but, that's not as often as the other way around.
Well, thanks for those insights.
Sure.
Garrett, I've got one more for you.
Sure.
So, and you just touched on it in terms of when we have these overruns, we have to defer other investments. So in this case, where the transfer is coming from Montebello Waste Treatment Plant filter renovation, was that also a 2022 project, or do you know if that?
No, the filter renovation project, that completed actually in fiscal '20, and the retainage was released in fiscal '22. So there is leftover appropriations on that particular project.
Well, that's great news. And so that's great news. I would love for us to have some visibility into those remaining funds when we're reviewing next year's budget for additional, projects.
Sure. So in Workday, we can show you the balance remaining on all the project accounts. And one of the things that agencies are working on with planning is, how to have a systemic review of those accounts and how to clean that up.
All right, but good job finding the money somewhere. Appreciate your feedback. Any other questions, guys? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, any questions on the August 8th consent or BOE transfers? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to accept.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the August 7th Board of Estimates transfers? Please
Aye.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Aye. And any abstentions? Thank you. Next, we've got the August 21st Board of Estimates meeting. There were 4 transfers on this agenda. Do we have any questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The last item on our consent agenda is a minor subdivision, final plans of 3805 Hickory Avenue in the 14th District. Any questions about this item? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Do I need a motion on consent agenda? Okay,
So moved.
thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? And any opposed? I flipped that. Great, that brings us to our regular agenda. Mr. Secretary? And I'm sorry, before we proceed, agenda item number 6, major subdivision final plans for Eager Landing at 1101 Rutland Avenue, and 1800 East Biddle Street. That item has been postponed. So if there's anyone here for that item, we'll advise you when it is back on the agenda. Mr. Secretary.
The first item on the regular agenda is a major subdivision final plan for 3718 and 3722 Old York Road in the 14th Councilmatic District.
Thank
Wow.
you. Good afternoon. Antoine Heath with the Land Use and Urban Design Division. As was just stated, the project before us is 3718 and 3722 Old York Road. This is a major subdivision which proposes subdividing 2 lots into 4 new lots for residential use. And the owner of the property is HAE Renovations, and the community planner for the area is Marie Anderson. Okay. Subject property is located in the Waverly neighborhood, east of Johns Hopkins University. This is a closer look at the site, which consists of 2 vacant lots. These 2 lots are proposed to be subdivided into 4 lots and improved with 4 single-family attached dwellings. The lots in the vicinity of the site are improved with single-family attached and detached dwellings. This is a view of the site from Old York Road. The property begins at the white fence and ends near the utility pole. This is a look at the existing conditions plat. Lots 34 and 34A make up approximately 6,600 square feet. This is a look at the final subdivision plan showing the 4 new lots, which are approximately 18 feet in width. This is a look at the final development plan, which shows the 4 proposed row home footprints and the driveways accessing Old York Road. These are the proposed front elevations along Old York Road. Each dwelling is 3 stories with a brick facade, topped with a cornice and cornice brackets. The dwellings all have front-loaded garages, as there is no rear or side access available. And the proposed design is consistent with the Baltimore City Design Manual. Here's a look at the side and rear elevations for the development, and they all have siding on each of the rear and side elevations. The Waverly Improvement Association was notified of this application, and all of the posting requirements were met. And staff is recommending approval of this application, and this will conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the commission, starting with Commissioner Allen?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Heath.
Commissioner Collins?
This, I think, your second time
Yes.
before us. Thank you. You're doing a very nice job. I'm just curious about the front-loading garages. That's not a typical
Yeah.
application in this particular area of the city. I understand that there can't be any rear access. That's one concern I have, and how that fits into the general area. And the second is that typically on the sides, we like to see some windows and piercing of the area. And I'm just curious whether there was a reason why that issue was not considered.
Yes. So in terms of the side elevations, the development it's planned to abut right up against the property line. So in those instances, we don't typically recommend windows, just in case the properties abutting them develop in the future, and then that would cause an issue having to cover the windows of the abutting properties. It's one of the reasons. Typically, if we have some side yard available, we'll definitely recommend windows, but that wasn't the case in this instance. And for the parking, since parking was, you have the 1-to-1 requirement for each dwelling. Like you said, it isn't something we typically recommend, but in this case, since there was no rear alley to access from, we allowed for it. And the way the garages are designed are consistent with the design manual. So in the instance where we do have front-loaded garages, the garages they can't make up more than 50% of the facade. And so in this instance, they're meeting those requirements.
Can I ask you a question of my fellow commissioner?
Sure.
I'm glad you asked that question because I had not paid attention to that. Is it a question of turning ratios or traffic patterns
Not
or,
100% sure.
I'm asking you, Marcia,
What my concern?
about the, I guess the curb cuts to the garages?
No, it's just that it's unusual to see front-loading garages in this community. I'm assuming it's non-existent right now. It's usually typical to new developments. I mean, obviously, this is a new build. I understand why they're providing it, but it's a little bit out of character. I will expand on my issue of the sides. So they're right at the property line. There's no setback required for this development?
If you're doing a row home, you can abut up against the property and, yeah.
Okay.
So,
All right. I don't know if I answered.
up against the property line, excuse
I
me.
was just curious.
Great. Commissioner Horn?
Okay.
No questions.
Commissioner McCoach? No question. Commissioner Jolin?
No questions.
Deputy Mayor? No question. So Antoine, my question is just the same about the garages. And to respond to your question about the concern, I think the concern is primarily one, pedestrians, because you're, introducing vehicles into a space that's supposed to be a pedestrian zone. Also, it's not consistent with the other houses on Old York Road. And it doesn't seem, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like it would be required. What I mean is, without the garage, there would not be a parking variance required.
So, yeah, because,
For a single-family home?
yes, so each dwelling unit requires one parking space per zoning. So if they were not able to provide it, and in this case, because there's no parking on the street on that side, it complies with the city's curb cut policy. If there was parking on that side, then they wouldn't be allowed to provide it because there has to be a net gain in private parking for whatever you remove off the street. But in this instance, they do have that avenue. Though it's not our preferred design, they can meet the requirement for parking. And if they don't, they would be pushed into needing a variance, which, if they were to ask for that, I suspect we would support.
And if I could add, I mean, we don't support front-loaded garages on new construction in any neighborhood in the city. So this is an exception to it's not neighborhood-centric, it's a broad citywide policy against front-loaded garages.
I don't have any further questions. Let me take that back, I do. And perhaps the applicant will choose to answer this question themselves, but do you know if they included the garage because they thought it was necessary, and would consider a variance in lieu of the garage? Or do you know if they included the garage, for marketing and sales appeal?
I'm not 100% sure what the motivation was, so I would refer to the applicant on that question.
Very well. I think that's all. If the applicant, if you'd like to, sir, please come up and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Antoine. Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time, to listen to the application.
Just your name for the record, please.
Berto Tuis. You can call me Bert if it's easier. The reason behind the garage, because that's something that definitely came into our mind, was in this case, we're bringing in 4 houses. Decision was based on the fact that, for 4 single-family homes, we're going with, 2 cars per house. So if we're talking about 2 cars per house, that means, we'll have to cram in, people will have to, find a space for 8 vehicles, which would be a kind of a hindrance, in the neighborhood. So the decision was made to kind of like facilitate that, eliminate that issue by having, off-street parking. Not so much marketing, but just, not causing additional, strains in the neighborhood.
Understood. That's a reasonable response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this matter? Do we have anyone who would like to speak in opposition of this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any deliberation amongst the commission? Candidly, I'm not a big fan of the garage. I think it may set a bad precedent, but I also understand that, parking can be a sensitivity for neighbors. If there's no one objecting to it and it doesn't conflict with our curb cut policy, although maybe we should take another look at our curb cut policy, I don't see any reason to oppose it. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second. Thank you, Commissioner Allen, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Secretary?
Robin Allen,
Approve?
Marcia Collins,
Approve.
Talib Horn,
Approve.
Claudia Julien,
Approve.
Doug McCoach,
Approve.
Justin Williams,
Approve.
and Eric Stevenson.
Approved. Thank you. Good luck, sir. Next is agenda item number 7, City Council Bill 240561, repeal of ordinance 99-573 as amended by ordinance 00093, planned unit development 4221 Shannon Drive in the 13th District.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. As we heard, this is a repeal of one of our older ordinances that just predates before I joined the department. So this is the general vicinity. There's the PUD lined up. It was created in a time where our M1 industrial zoning did not allow for outdoor storage of materials. M1 at the time was a buffer industrial district that could be separating residential from industrial or residential from heavier commercial. And so that's the reason why it was the lightest of industrial uses. But also at that time, industrial was industrial, commercial was commercial. Though commercial had residential, there weren't really mixed-use districts in the same way that we have today. So we had a lot of PUDs, or planned unit developments, that were created at the time to fix that weakness of our earlier code. So it was literally created just so that they could have the outdoor storage of materials for this operator and storage of trailers. It's no longer necessary because today's code has better tools that are available to it. Outdoor storage of materials is allowed in the underlying zoning district today. It also has specific use standards that compel the provision of screening and all the things that we wanted to have that were generally included in the PUD because it wasn't in the zoning code at the time. So we have that tool available to us now, and so we can repeal the PUD because it's redundant, no longer necessary, and will remove the burden of them having to get a planning review every time they touch something. And so we recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Tiso. I'll start with the commission. Commissioner Horn, any questions?
No questions. I was trying to see if there was any community letters or anything like that, but you said the community association was notified, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of those invisible changes that, if you didn't know this was a single property plan unit development, you wouldn't know it. And, I think this came up because there's a potential change to the building, and we're like, hey, do you really need this PUD anymore? Because it was a single topic thing. And the answer is no, let's make it simpler.
Okay. That was it.
Commissioner McCoach?
No questions.
Commissioner Jolie?
No questions.
Deputy Mayor? Commissioner Allen?
questions. Just whoever said this was ancient, I'm offended because I think this is my city council bill, I think, back in the day.
For those playing at home that may not know, when Robin left the department I took her job, so.
It did what?
Commissioner Collins?
No questions.
I've got a couple. So
Sure.
this was the PUD, as we saw, way predates Transform Baltimore.
Yes.
So it had different zoning before, and now we're saying the underlying zoning is I-1.
Yes.
So when we rezone areas that are already under a PUD, we change the underlying zoning, but the PUD still supersedes.
Right, because they have that, and until they repeal it or modify it, then it still trumps the underlying zoning. Now, there are some permissive provisions in the transition rules in the zoning code. So let's say the underlying zoning district adds some use that is permitted in that new underlying zoning that was not explicitly permitted in the older PUD because it refers to an older zoning code. Unless there's a specific prohibition on that use, they automatically gain that. So they don't lose anything, but they get to still operate their PUD as is until they change it or repeal it. And there were some mechanics when we created the new zoning code that would force, if there was a major change, it would force a rewriting, a repeal and replacement to modernize the PUDs. Council amended that some years ago so that it allows major changes without a repeal and replace. There are some instances where we have seen that, for example, where properties are notched out of a PUD. You don't have to touch the text for that. But that's a limited instance where that would work.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this issue? Sir, please step up and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Christopher Mudd. I'm here on behalf of the property owner and the folks who are actually operating on the site. Nothing to add, just want to let you know that we're here in support, and I thank you very much for your consideration. Thank you, Mr. Tiso.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very well. Anyone else who'd like to speak on this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any deliberation? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, Commissioner Jolin, Mr. Secretary.
Robin Allen,
Approve?
Marsha Collins,
Approve.
Glebe Horn,
Approve.
Claudia Jolin,
Approve.
Doug Coach,
Approve.
Justin Williams,
Approve.
and Eric Stevenson.
Approve. That brings us to agenda item number 8. I won't steal your thunder. I'll just note that we are almost on schedule.
You bragging on Sean there? City Council Bill number 24-0571, a zoning conditional use conversion of a single-family dwelling unit to 2 dwelling units in the R8 district. Variances at 730 East Preston Street in the 12th Councilmanic District. Eric Tiso will present.
Alrighty, so this is a conversion. There's the property there. It's technically the third one in, but the end building up against Proctor Street has been demolished and the adjacent building supported. So there it is from the overhead. Zooming in a bit, you can see where those cars are parked is where there is another lot that used to have a home on it. It is a vacant structure. So as with many conversions that you see, there's some conditional use standards that we have to meet in order to approve these. And I'll walk through those in a bit. Also with some of the bulk requirements for the lot area requirement. This is an R8 residentially zoned property. Each dwelling unit requires 750 square feet of lot area per unit. In this case, the lot's only 1,400 square feet in size instead of the 1,500 that is required. So a 6.6% lot area variance is required for that. They are planning on providing a parking space. There is a parking variance that is included in the bill, but if they provide that parking space, it won't be necessary, and that would remove that variance, which we would encourage since the standards and findings for that are a bit higher. As for the conversion standards, we require that the building itself has to have 1,500 square feet or more in gross floor area, not counting the basement. This has 1,540, so they meet that requirement. For each of the dwelling units that is in the building, based on the number of bedrooms that you have, there's a certain square footage that each of those units must have. In this case, the first floor unit will only have 490 square feet instead of the 1,000 square feet. In part, that is because the way they have to reconfigure the inside space, they lose a good bit of floor space in order to make that happen. The two-bedroom unit on the second floor will meet that requirement.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first unit discrepancy?
So the first unit, I don't have it on the screens, but you'll have it on your tablets when you look at the floor plan. There's a long hallway that accesses the upper unit, and that takes out a good chunk of that floor plate, because the two are the same size in floor plate, but one is missing that shared space, which doesn't count towards the unit size. And so therefore, that's the need for the variance for
I couldn't
the
have
unit
heard you
size.
correctly on the numbers.
490 square feet
Out of it's
is,
supposed to be what size?
for a two-bedroom unit is 1,000 square feet.
So less than 50%?
I'm hearing noises behind me. I'll let the attorney correct me if I'm wrong. Did I
Sorry,
misread
I
that?
just want to clarify, it's a one-bedroom unit on the
Okay.
first floor.
That makes a
Drew
difference.
Tilden, Rosenberg, Martin, Greenberg.
Thank you,
That's
Ms.
correct.
Tilden. So 490 instead of 750.
Right, there we go.
Still less than 2/3.
It is.
Okay, please continue.
So that's the numbers there. So we're recommending approval for this to allow a vacant boarded structure to be rehabilitated and put back into productive use.
Thank you, Mr. Tiso. Any questions from the commission for Mr. Tiso? We didn't receive plans with this application, which is okay, I'm just clarifying.
Yeah,
Findings of findings,
yeah,
okay.
they're attached to the midpoint, I think, of that document. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to break that apart, sorry. To make
That's fine.
Not as obvious.
I'm just, we hear a lot of these applications. 2 units is usually perfectly agreeable. It doesn't seem like there's anything atypical about this building. I'm trying to figure out why we're looking at such a large variance.
I'll let the applicant speak to the financial need of making it make sense, but our typical policy is aiming for 1 unit per floor, and unusually, they actually are intending to provide the parking.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tiso. I guess we'll hear from Ms. Tilden. Anything else to add?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's part of the footprint. I'm not sure if they're, so
Yeah.
can you help us understand if there's something unique about the layout of this building or why this unit is only able to achieve 490 feet?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you look at it, there's a way that you could sort of split it up. So each of the two took up more of the square footage so that we had 2 one-bedroom units. But I'm not sure if you had the chance to review my findings of fact, but I want to give a little bit of background. So the applicant here is Rebuild Metro. You all are familiar with them, I know. And the goal is actually to create a unique homeownership opportunity. So the second and third floors are going to be a homeownership unit, and the intent is for the ground floor space to be either an in-law suite or actually a rental income opportunity. So that is kind of where this is stemming from.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
And I am
absolutely.
familiar with Rebuild Metro, and I'm a big fan of the 2-unit model to promote ownership. It's something that we're attempting on the west side as well. So that's all great. I just, maybe Mr. Tisa, what's the total square footage of this building? Is this a small building?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, the building footprint is actually, Eric, if you're able to go back to the aerial image.
20.
If you take a look at this, these lots are much deeper than the average row home lot, and the footprint of the building itself, while there are several others that are also a similar footprint, there's one extension on the ground floor that provides for the addition, some of the square footage that's on the first floor. But in general, the building footprint is pretty small, which is fantastic because it allows us to provide the additional off-street parking space, which does not require the off-street parking variance, but it would either be we bump out and sort of make this building footprint bigger and not be able to provide the off-street parking space, or we, do what we're doing right now.
Now, I've looked at the plans a little bit more carefully. I think I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Ms. Tilden? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any deliberation? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Thank you, Commissioner McCoach.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Horn. Mr. Secretary?
Robin Allen,
Approve.
Marcia Collins,
Approve.
Talib Horn. Approved. Claudia Jolin,
Approve.
Doug McCoach,
Approve.
Justin Williams,
Approve.
and Eric Stevenson.
Approve.
Next item on the agenda is City Council Bill number 24-0572, a zoning conditional use conversion of a single-family dwelling unit to 3 dwelling units in the R8 zoning district with variances at 1730 North Broadway in the 12th Councilmatic District. Eric Tisa will present.
Good afternoon again. So this is the property here, the one with the angled rear yard. That's where it sits in the block. Zooming in a little bit further. So these are a 3-story structure that is currently vacant. So again, we have the conversion standards as a conditional use, which I've outlined in my staff report. But again, for the bulk standards, it is also R8. So 750 square feet of lot areas needed for the unit or for the per unit of flat property area. This is a little over 1,465 square feet instead of the 1,875 required. So that's a lot area variance of 22%. In this case, for 3 dwelling units, the 2 additional units need a parking space each for a total of 2, and there are none that are able to be provided. We think that's reasonable because the rear yard cannot provide a single parking space just because of the size of it. It can't meet that requirement. Again, for the conversion standards, the building has to be at least 1,500 square feet of gross floor area, not including any basement. This one makes that requirement. As for the units sizes themselves, based on their bedroom count, there are some variances needed here. The 1 3-bedroom unit in the basement and on the first floor will be 1,560 square feet, which meets that requirement for it. The 2-bedroom units need 1,000 square feet of floor area. Second floor will have 680 square feet in gross floor area, and the third floor unit will have 760 square feet, so each a little bit short of the 1,000 square foot required. Again, the building is what it is. It's vacant. We would like to see it put back into use. So we think that the request for both conditional use and variances are reasonable. We recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Tiso. Any questions from the commission? Start with Commissioner Horn.
No questions from me.
Commissioner McCoach.
Eric, I have a question for you about the plan configuration.
Okay.
I've been seeing a lot of conversions come through the commission. And one of the consistencies is that there's always a dedicated bath for each bedroom. And I just wonder, are these also sometimes used as congregate living facilities? Because the configuration would lend itself for that.
We've noticed that too. The use permit is the use permit, so they will have a single-family dwelling, and if they use it for a group home of some form, that's a use violation. Not to say that they couldn't get it approved, because it would be unallowable use as long as it's under 16 people capacity, which I'm guessing this would be. But they would need a different use approval for that to be legal.
Okay, so it's up to the owner.
Yeah, we've also looked at it in that if you had a dwelling unit that was shared by roommates that were not otherwise related to one another, having separate bath facilities would be a handy feature for roommates.
Yep.
So it works regardless of,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Commissioner Jolie?
Yes, so I clearly just approved a variance for slightly, not specifically economic reasons. So is there a reason here other than economics that we're doing variances for these 3 units and this not just being a 2-unit property?
Well, I'll defer to the applicant for that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor? No questions. Thanks. Commissioner Allen?
Hey, Eric, what you just said about the group home violation part,
Sure. So the question was, when you look at the floor plans, each bedroom tends to have its own bathroom. Could that then serve to be used as a group home type facility or congregate living? And the answer would be yes, only because it's convenient for each bedroom to have its own bath facilities, but they would need to be approved for that. So if they get a dwelling unit, a single family or multifamily unit, and then do something different, that's a zoning violation.
Okay.
Now, they could get approved potentially as a conditional use, but they need to do that if that were ever what a future owner would want to do.
okay. Thank you for clarifying or repeating.
Commissioner Collins?
I don't know if it was because I was looking at this last night, but my math is getting confused here. In the analysis that we had, insufficient lot area and variance, we talk about 2 dwelling units, but this is for a 3 dwelling unit, and I wasn't really clear on how those square foot calculations were done based, I was just getting confused.
Are we
with-
talking about the based on the bedroom sizes? Is that the,
Yeah, the lot and variance, the zoning district, multifamily dwellings require 750 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. In this case, for 2 dwelling units, somehow we got to 1,875 square
oh,
feet.
that is a typo because that's supposed to be 3 instead of 2.
Okay,
Yeah,
Right.
so.
I feel reassured. It's
Yep.
driving me crazy.
You see me doing 4 of these because I got nobody else.
Gotcha.
So I was rushing to make this happen. So yeah, the 1875, in case anybody's wondering about that, because you need 750 square feet of lot area, but there's a provision in the code, which I think I cited in the staff report. When you get 3 or more, half of a lot area rounds up. So 750 times 2.5 is at 1875. That's how we landed that.
All right, I appreciate that because that was going to be my next question. 'Cause it
Yep.
was- Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Tiso, just a few comments. One is on our bulk standards, lot area specifically. I would like to, I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. Is there a reason for our lot area requirement? And that's a rhetorical question. There could be several reasons. There could be a stormwater argument. There could be, I don't know, other arguments, but I haven't really heard one. My concern is that at minimum, it could be arbitrary. At worst, it could be, similar to other zoning and housing policies that are unnecessarily restrictive. So I would love for us to take an actual look at that instead of us just having 3 variances every meeting. And I don't know what the process or the timeline, I don't mean by next week or anything, but I'd like to.
Well, I can give you an answer now, maybe if you want. So the whole idea of lot area translating into number of units was just something that was created at the start of modern zoning at the beginning or the turn of the last century, where you have to, because you can't legislate common sense. It's hard to figure that out. You have to put some concrete numbers to it. So somebody determined, well, if you were to take the size of the property and divide it by a factor, and that'll yield a number of units, and that's as close of a proxy as we can get. So zoning codes everywhere do this kind of a thing. Under our prior zoning code, we did not have the second half of this that you see in the conversions rules, where in theory you could have a very large property with a very small structure. And the theory is you could divide that lot area and get a large number of units, that there's no possible way you can meet building code by cramming them into this tiny building. We also see the reverse, where there's a fairly small property that has a relatively large structure that covers the entire thing that would not be able to fill the entire building economically. Believe it or not, years and years ago, downtown area under the then B5 had the same residential density as R8 neighborhoods. And we had retrofitting buildings that were no longer commercial that were going to residential, that they could only fill half of it with anything less than palatial-sized units. So we actually removed the lot area requirement to get around that. So it was just a means by which to get to some form of density. Now, can we do something about that? Yes. And I field questions from council members or members of the public all the time, and we remind them, you could easily, and Becky Witt, the executive director of BMZA, says this all the time, you could change the bulk requirements and make all these variances go away. But remember, permitted is permitted is permitted. So that means that if you allow them to get closer to the property and that gets the next door neighbor annoyed, sorry, it's allowed. So there's a balance point there of trying to make it make sense. So I know, I think it was the mid-2000s, we looked at the average lot sizes by zoning district and tried to figure out, does this factor as a quick gut check make sense for approximate densities? In most of the cases, yes, where you typically will end up with about yielding 1 unit per floor in a typical row home building. However, Baltimore's history prior to the 1971 code had 2 different maps. One was a use district and one was a bulk and height district. So you have, depending on how they overlapped, when all of that got pushed into single zoning districts that had everything modern Euclidean style zoning code, you end up with really deep lots like this one that have relatively small structures on them. Or you can have really little lots with really big 4 stories on them, and there's no way to avoid variances without dramatically increasing the number and the fine-grainedness of all of the zoning districts. Like if you ever look at the zoning code in New York City, and I'm not interested in doing that,
I think,
if we're honest.
I'm serious about wanting to take a look at this. It's not going to happen in this meeting. I think that rear setbacks would address, any concerns with building out. I think, as I already said, it seems like this is one of those restrictive tools that was used to limit multifamily development. And if we're going to be proactive and intentional about our vacant housing strategy, we need to review our code in the context of residential conversions. We have thousands of row houses that need to be rehabbed, and we're in here talking about how our zoning code doesn't exactly line up with the condition in the majority of our city. When I talked about the lot area variances, we need to talk about floor area variances too. If the common sense is 1 unit per floor in a row house, that doesn't seem that hard to write. So I think that we can improve this, but we're obviously on a tangent from the issue in front of us. So anything else from the staff report?
No.
And I think we already went around with questions. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this issue?
Thank you. My name is Chase Hoffberger. I'm sorry that the developer himself could not be here. He's sort of mired in that stretch of August between camp and school, which I thoroughly escaped. Commissioner Julian, to answer your question, part of the reasoning is the common sense that's been discussed a little bit. One floor, all that. The other is this property has about 3,000 square feet of interior space to work with. The basement is usable, and there's a bedroom down there for the first floor unit. You can sort of turn the economics on its end. There's currently 7 bedrooms configured for the property. If the building was converted to 2 units, there could still be 7 bedrooms in there. There could also be 8. So that's kind of how they might make the economics work. That would create a series of problems down the line that would probably be more detrimental to the neighborhood than if there were 3 units in there. There would be greater opportunity for sort of, I think, the type of group homes that Commissioner McCoach mentioned. I was just in Federal Hill where there's a concern about having 4-unit apartments for the sake of people who want to have parties. There's kind of more opportunity for rambunctious neighbors. 2 bedrooms in a unit is sort of a good configuration for nurses who are at Hopkins or parents and their kids to have their own bedrooms and bathrooms and things like that. So there's all sorts of reasons why that type of configuration works. The bedrooms here are about 150 square feet per bedroom, which I think is a pretty good appropriate size. And every apartment has the living room, the kitchen, 2 bathrooms, hallways, and kind of the accoutrements that you'd want in a standard apartment. So I'm here to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffberger. Do you have anything further?
Nope, great answer, thank you.
Any other questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, questions, deliberation, or motion? I'm sorry, before we go, Mr. Tiso, I do have one more remark I need to make.
Sure.
You noted a couple of times that this is a vacant building. And it's also in a disinvested, although up-and-coming neighborhood. That's fine, but it shouldn't matter. If we determine that a 600 square foot unit is acceptable here, it should also be acceptable in Waverly. If we determine that a parking variance is acceptable here, it should also be acceptable in Roland Park. So I would like for all of us, because I do it too, to retrain our thinking and not, lower our standards because of the way a neighborhood looks or the way it's been treated in the past, and make sure that we're, enforcing and holding the same high standards in all of our communities based on their potential, not their past.
Eric, I did just want to make one comment to the commission, and that is that I wouldn't be so quick to jump on the 1 floor, 1 unit rule of thumb. There's simply too many different types of townhomes in our city, from 14-foot wide 2-story units to 27-foot wide 4-story units. And so we should just keep an open mind about what's right in terms of the context. That's all.
Absolutely. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
I was gonna say, leave it to die. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Secretary?
Robin Allen,
Approve.
Marcia Collins,
Approve.
Philippe Horn,
Approve.
Claudia Jolin,
Approve.
Doug McCoach,
Approve.
Justin Williams,
Approve.
and Eric Stevenson.
Approve.
The next item has 2 actions. City Council Bill Number 240573, repeal of Ordinance 04-824, a planned unit development at 1901 Light Street, 1921 Light Street, the bed of Johnson Street, and Block 1947, Lot 1 in the 11th District. And City Council Bill number 24-0574, rezoning for 1921 Light Street. Eric Tiso will present.
One more, then I'll sit down. So this is the plan unit development that's off of East Wells and Light Street, southeast corner, highlighted in yellow here, right above the I-95 corridor and the railroad tracks. This plan unit development was created in 2004. The reason for that was this campus here, which, let's see if I can highlight it. Can I make the pointer work? I'm just going to walk over here. So this, the plan unit development is this satellite parking lot, the former street that is now a separate lot, it's closed. And then these collection of buildings, which are two properties, one that is kind of like that, and then one that is back here. In 2004, so I happen to staff this PUD, this was an industrial property. And they were trying to figure out how to transition a lot of the former industrial properties in this area to some other use. At the time, BDC did a study that there was a lot of outmoded industrial uses that either didn't have the clear ceiling heights or the clear span. They were no longer attractive for industrial. So that led to a series of rezonings or trying to figure out what tools we had available to us at the time to allow these properties to be productively reused. So at the time, these properties were rezoned to R8 residential, and a PUD was created, and the plan unit development's purpose was to give the flexibility of uses, and it had a mixture of residential, some supporting commercial, and industrial uses to allow, as tenants changed out, to allow that rolling over to non-industrial uses. So in today's code, we have different tools that are available to us to allow for a better mix of uses that we did not have in our older code. In our prior zoning code, industrial was industrial, residential was residential with very, very limited amount of supporting commercial, and it required very large unit counts in order to even access that. Our commercial zones did have a mix of uses. It did have commercial and residential, but some of the commercial was a little too intense, or it didn't pencil out for the number of units that you could get, versus the space and all of that. So that was the reason why the PUD was created. In today's terms, the applicants don't believe that they need to have that. The larger portion of the property, which was 1901 Light Street, I think it was previously known as 101 East Wells, and it changed address, has been converted over to residential use. So the last building, 1921 Light Street, which was the former Guardian warehouse, is possibly going to be demolished and replaced with another residential option that may need commercial support. So that's the purpose of the companion rezoning that goes with us. In any case, if they're able to get that rezoning, this PUD will no longer be necessary because we don't need to have industrial uses here anymore, and the underlying C1 will provide the residential density that they need. Coincidentally, C1 does not require parking, so it will not force them to provide large amounts of parking that they don't need, and will provide the residential density that they do need. So with that, the PUD is no longer required and can be repealed, which we support. So that's the first half. I'll pause here for any questions before going on to rezoning if you'd like. If not.
Are you going to get to findings of fact in the next half of your presentation?
For the rezoning part, yes. I just want to put a break here in case people had questions. If not, I'll carry on. So again, there's a property. This is today's zoning code. So you can see that the property is there in that green color, which is the R8 residential. You'll note that there's a couple of spots that are around it that are not. You see OR2 is the Foundation for the Blind across the street. The C2 is 2 East Wells Street, which was a demo rebuild that it basically is doing what 1921 Light will do. So we've seen a couple of cases in the immediate blocks where they use that mixed-use commercial in order to make this kind of a thing happen. So if we look at the prior zoning, you can see that it's R8 on the south side of Wells Street. Well, previously it was industrial, but it had been rezoned along with the creation of this PUD to R8 residential. And then that little kind of pork chop shaped property immediately to the west where that C1 zone is, we actually proposed its inclusion at the time. And then in more modern times, they rezoned it to C1 because it was more profitably to be used as commercial. So this area has been kind of in flux for a couple of decades, trying to figure out how to reinvent itself. And that's it, overlaid on top of each other. So for the rezoning, there's a proposed findings of fact that the applicants have submitted for your review. And I can go through this if you wish, but basically the preservation of industrial, which we normally do support, but in this area it just doesn't make sense. So going back 20 years, we started the changeover to find adaptive reuses for these buildings. This fits in with that. The method of doing that matches two other notable projects just a couple blocks away to the west. So this meets the neighborhood's area. It seems to make sense. It keeps these buildings functionally usable. And we believe that it meets the required findings. Again, you have also detailed findings submitted by the applicant to consider. And so we believe that it meets all the requirements for the code and should be approved.
Change or mistake?
The change is the easiest one because if we're repealing the PUD, now we have a building that's all R8, which creates a lot of problems. So that's the most obvious one that we can rely on.
And the changes,
The repealing of the PUD and the changing over of the area over the past 20 years from industrial to mixed use, but predominantly residential. But there wasn't a mistake because we've been proceeding along this line, both under the prior zoning code and this one, to make this kind of thing happen. We have two exact examples just within 2 blocks.
very good. Any other questions for Mr. Tiso? Thank you very much. So, are you done presenting on both items?
I am.
Great. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak on this matter? Sir?
We've got bigger fish to fry today. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chairman, or Vice Chairman, Acting Chairman. Joe Woolman, Silverman Thompson, on behalf of the applicant. As Mr. Tiso indicated, we did submit our proposed findings of fact regarding mistake and change. If you have any questions, we're here to answer those questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Deliberation. Do we have a motion? And I guess we should move them separately, I suppose. So do we have a motion on the repeal of the PUD?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Second. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Secretary?
Robin Allen.
Approve.
Marcia Collins.
Approve.
Philippe Horn.
Approve.
Claudia Jolin.
Approve.
Doug McCoach.
Approve.
Justin Williams.
Approve.
And Eric Stevenson.
Approve. And do we have a motion on the rezoning? And just please note whoever makes the motion to reference the findings of fact.
Motion to approve based on the findings of fact submitted.
Thank you, Commissioner Horn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Mr. Secretary?
Robin Allen.
Approve.
Marcia Collins.
Approve.
Philippe Horn.
Approve.
Claudia Jolin.
Approve.
Doug McCoach.
Approve.
Justin Williams.
Approve.
And Eric Stevenson.
Approve. And I believe that brings us to our final item for tonight.
Final item for tonight is the Harbor Place Master Plan for review and comment. Caitlin Audette will present.
And
11th
Mr.
Councilmember
Secretary,
District.
this is for review and comment, but no official action? Correct.
Do we want to continue?
Yeah, continue.
Okay, great. So as stated, the request is to review the Harbor Place Master Plan's UDAP process. So I am Caitlin Audette. The petitioner here is MCB Real Estate. They are also the owner along with the City of Baltimore, and this is in the Downtown Planning District for which I am the community planner. So the site for today's item is the land area to the south of Pratt Street and east of Light Street. This area includes the 2 Harbor Place pavilions, which are bordered by the city-owned promenade as well as Pratt and Light. The city-owned parcel is bisected by the McKeldin Spur, which directs northbound vehicular traffic on Light Street to Calvert Street. So as outlined in the UDAP process, final recommendation from the panel may be presented to the Planning Commission as part of their review, and that's what we're doing here today. So no vote will be taken, as there is no item regarding Harbor Place that requires such a vote. So comments from the public, which there will be public testimony today, and from the commission will be considered as part of the overall review. So what's been done to date? So as you all may recall, 3 bills representing a zoning amendment, amendment to the urban renewal plan, and the charter amendment were introduced to City Council and were reviewed by Planning Commission with a public hearing on November 30th, as well as a second public hearing and a vote on December 21st of 2023. The 3 bills were enacted by the Mayor and City Council on March 13th of 2024. This item has also been reviewed by UDAP, which is a technical design review. It's open to the public, but it does not include public testimony. So this is unique. This opportunity today is unique in that there will be public testimony. So this project has been reviewed by UDAP 4 times. So the first time was on November 16th. The second was on February 1st. The third was on May 23rd. And the fourth was on July 18th. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page, there will be additional reviews that the planning department will complete for this development. So for UDAP, the project has completed its master plan review, but it will need to return to the panel for future separate reviews for all the buildings. The project will also be reviewed per standards set forth in section 4.3 of the zoning code, which is for properties in the C5 district, which this is in a C5 district. It will also go through site plan review, which is an internal committee with interagency representatives that reviews concept level plans to provide direction to applicants and encourages them to meet public policy goals. This will, of course, have to meet the zoning code. And as a publicly owned property, it is under the purview of CHAP. Additional reviews continue that they must complete within the planning department are for the landscape. So any projects that involve 5,000 square feet or more of site disturbance and require site plan review committee must go through the city landscape manual and meet those requirements. It is within the floodplain, and so it is required to meet all floodplain requirements, and it's within the critical area. So it must meet all of those requirements. So just kind of want to set the stage for the various levels of requirements that this project will need to meet.
Can I
Yes.
pause you for a question?
Yeah.
And I think that this is a vernacular thing. I just want to clarify. So it says Harbor Place Master Plan. This is a master development plan for the multiple parcels that are part of the Harbor Place plan. This is not a comprehensive master plan like we do in other situations. Is that correct to say?
So I have a slide that talks about, with the different aspects of it. So we have the privately owned properties. Those are the 2 pavilions that are owned by MCB. Then we have the city-owned space that is part of the project, and that is the promenade and the kind of the space around those buildings. And then there's the study area, which includes the roadways. And so the group, they can probably speak a little bit more to the intricacies of what their purview is, but it is, the master plan would be for the buildings they own as well as the city-owned properties that surround them.
Thank you.
Okay. And there is an image here that will help explain that. So additional reviews, any piers, marinas, or related structures must go through review by a whole bunch of people, including the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Maryland Department of the Environment, the Baltimore City Fire Department, the Baltimore City Department of Transportation, and the Baltimore City Department of Works. The Department of Transportation will also require traffic studies, mitigation fees for street closings, right-of-way changes. They have that review authority. The Department of Public Works must also have review authority for stormwater runoff. And BMZA reviews all water-dependent uses in the critical area buffer. Okay, so this is the image I was talking about. So you can see that the pavilions are here in black, and that represents the privately owned property. And then it's kind of hard to see here, but there's a diagonal hatch that's labeled project area. And then you have the kind of a dashed line, which is the study area. And so the master plan is for the project area. Okay. And this is another important diagram, just kind of set the stage for what we're talking about. So it was included as part of the initial plan back in November. And it shows the existing condition layered over with the initial proposal. So here you can see the size of the existing pavilions. You can see the spur that goes from Light to Calvert. And you can see kind of how that interacts with what's proposed. Okay, so I'm going to go through this chronologically, starting with what was presented in November, the panel's response to that, how they responded at the subsequent 3 hearings. I've shrunk that into a very small amount of time, so there is a ton more information. We have all of that on our website. If you have questions, please feel free to stop me. Okay, so diving into the initial proposal. This was what was shared at the UDET meeting on November 16th. So the comments from the panel were that this initial plan was difficult to understand. Public and private space weren't clearly defined, and even what space would be green or park-like wasn't obvious. Much of the focus of the presentation was on renderings of the finished buildings, which the panel thought was less important to that stage of a master plan review. And so there was a lot of confusion by the panel about kind of what was even being proposed. And that's actually why we got that, that one diagram that shows the project area, study area, and buildings as a response to the panel's comments. So some of the critical diagrams that were presented in that initial meeting include these 3 concept ideas that the development team created. So aspects of each of these have been included in the final design. So the first here is Big Water, where the goal was to bring the water that is the heart of the Inner Harbor deeper into the site and closer to the heart of the city. The second was Big Green. This is where more marshland and green space was integrated into every aspect of the design, really buildings set within a park. And the last idea was that of Big Shade, where a substantial tree canopy would be created along both the street and the promenade, providing shade to pedestrians in all of these spaces. So you can see just an overabundance of trees. So these were all very highly conceptual ideas the design team shared at that initial meeting. So following the November UDET meeting, the development team met with planning staff with a goal to create clear drawings that the panel would be able to truly comment on. There were limited design changes between November and February, as the goal was to make the proposal clear to both the public and the panel. So here you can see the updated plan with easier to read graphics, as well as a number of diagrams that we'll go through that more clearly identify how the team responded to public comments they received during their outreach that spanned many months over the previous summer. So another aspect that was discussed in November, but more clearly displayed at the February meeting, was the resiliency and adaptive and accessible needs to the site. So the response the design team had to those. So I haven't included all of this really detailed information here, but the team worked with the city to determine an acceptable level of risk and completed work to understand the potential range of future flooding. So how this impacted the design is shown here and in the subsequent slides. So you can begin to see how kind of that the plan view previously now has some dimension, and the promenade has lower portions and upper portions. And we'll get into that here. So this is the existing promenade, and you can see identified the existing relieving platform is at plus 6 feet above sea level. Yeah, that's right. You can see where the Hurricane Isabel surge was, just kind of an understanding of what that current condition is. And this is what is proposed. And so this section hasn't changed much in the design, but this is where we really saw it clearly illustrated. So the intent is to raise the promenade to this plus 10 feet above floodplain or above sea level. And have, that's to protect the properties from flooding, right? But the team really wanted to maintain a human connection to the water. And so here you can see the lower promenade, which is directly at the water's edge. It's only got 2 feet above sea level, and that allows for that really much deeper connection with the water. Additionally, here you can see the width of the existing promenade in red, as opposed to the proposed upper promenade and lower promenade. Okay, so here's a view of that section in plan as well, and how they relate to one another. So just kind of wanted to give some more information on the promenade specifically. Okay, another request of UDAP back in November was to better understand how the design team came up with this design. What were the scenarios they investigated? How did they, they had these 3 big concepts, but then what were the studies they completed to actually get to the final form that they were presenting? And this is an urge to understand what ideas have been considered and what was that iterative process. And so they shared a number of so the team in February shared a number of different massing studies, kind of showing what was considered, how they considered them, and what they learned from them. Again, I'm not gonna go into too much detail because we could be here all day. Another helpful diagram was providing the clear differentiation of character, which kind of showed how they organized the site. So Pratt Street and Light Street have this defined character, and that influenced what kind of uses were placed on them within this master plan. So you can see that Light Street is characterized by residential and hospitality uses, with Pratt Street characterized by office and commercial uses. Additionally, this was a request from the UDAP panel in November, is to better understand the accessibility throughout the site and how people would be able to get through the site if they had a stroller, a wheelchair, any of these needs. And so this diagram, which was provided in February, showed that the entire space will be universally accessible. So everything yellow has a less than 2% slope. And then you can also see these barrier-free ramps identified in red. Just another image of kind of that ground plane section of the entire site, including the loading for the various buildings. So at A, you can see where loading for the 2 buildings along Pratt Street, the sale building and the office building, how that would function. And then at B and C, at this point, this is how they were imagining loading for all of these buildings. And that was a direct response to the panel who had requested a better understanding of how these buildings would be serviced. Something that I did not include in here was zoomed in views of the spaces between buildings. That was what we requested, and they did provide. Again, I didn't want to belabor this presentation, but they did provide kind of a zoomed-in view between the two residential buildings, the residential building and the building to the north, between the two buildings on Pratt Street, so you could have a better understanding of how those functioned. Okay, moving to May. So the team presented in May, specifically responding to the panel's comments from February. So this included comments regarding the loading and servicing of the parcels. Kind of, they had that gray diagram, but how did that actually function? Let's see here. Exploring a pull-through across the loading condition at the residential buildings to minimize vehicular crossings. A review of how the sale building met the ground at the corner. You can see that identified as number 3. A more gracious entry to the park at the corner of Light and Pratt. Consideration of how to best activate the office building, considering alternative uses, as well as softening the promenade along Rashfield for environmental benefits. So this presentation was very focused on these comments and didn't kind of talk about anything else. So here, previously the team had 9 feet at this dimension, and per the UDAP comments, they expanded it to 35 feet. The team reviewed various options for how the sale building can meet the ground, and upon review of these various options, the team felt that maintaining the proposal of the peel out, which is the first option, would allow for greater accessibility to the roof of the sale building and have a less of an impact to that space at the end of the park. At the request of the panel, the team showed how that South Street extension would handle loading for the 2 buildings here. This area, that they were explained to the panel that the area would only be serviced after hours and that no other vehicles, save for loading and life safety, would be allowed in the area. One member of the panel asked that they consider additional uses at this building and expanding the building. It seemed small and squat. And so at the office building, the team responded to the panel's comments by reviewing the addition of residential above the proposed commercial. The team didn't think this met the goals of the project or the overall vision, primarily because it would require substantial expansion of the ground floor, limiting the openness that was a critical design goal at this location. So it would require a separate lobby, more elevators, eating up that space at the ground floor. And here you can see another comment from the panel was this view coming in, if anybody's ever walked on the promenade and you're going by the World Trade Center, it's a very tight squeeze. It feels uncomfortable to get onto the promenade around the World Trade Center. And so this is showing how it's expanding based off of limiting the footprint of the office building. And again, this was a diagram to respond to panel's comments. And lastly, the team responded to the request from the panel that the edge of the water at Rashfield be completed with something that's more beneficial to the environment. So it's currently riprap, and they were saying they would apply some vegetation to that riprap for that environmental benefit. So following this meeting, the team had several intense design meetings with planning staff and other city agencies. At these meetings, staff helped the team focus on specific comments from the panel, including a need to not just extend the streets, but have a clear and intentional design behind the extension of the street. So right now, the buildings kind of are located where buildings are located across the street, right? So that these, even though they're not vehicular streets, these pathways where the streets are can continue through the site. And a comment that the panel had brought up again and again was, that's very simple. Why are you doing it? And show us a little bit more about how these buildings, sometimes you want to break the mold a little bit. You can have a rule, but it becomes interesting when you push that. And so here, the conversation with staff was a lot about how you could push that while still maintaining their design goal of clear sight lines from the streets and openness through the site. So the conversations with staff were really focused on Pratt Street. And you can see some of the initial responses to the meeting here, which were presented at the July 18th meeting. So this is an initial sketch following one of the productive meetings that the team had with staff. And you can see, really working for that sense of arrival around World Trade Center and adding greenery to that plaza, setting the office building within a green space, highlighting the entry from Calvert Street, really creating a sense of arrival at this space where all of them, the Calvert Street, the Light Pratt intersection, and Camden Plaza all come together, and making a placemaking moment at the end of South Street. So this was the resulting plan, which feels more aligned with the big concepts that were developed by the team initially, the big shade and the big green. So you can see the buildings are now kind of set in a more park-like setting. And I'll go through some of the initial or the changes that were made here to get to this. So here, the team shows what was the previous condition around the office building and around the World Trade Center. And here's the proposal. So as you can see, this is where that big green idea comes in, where you have marshlands that allow for people to move through them and get to the promenade, but also create a sense of arrival and a softening of the edges. And this continues around the office building. Let's see. Oh, and as part of this too, you can see, so B is where South Street is. And one of the things that came out of the meetings with staff is talking about how this can feel like a place in itself, and not everything needs to be moving through to a separate destination. And then C here is showing that there's something to view at the end of this South Street. So as you're walking through, you have a clear kind of something to look at in the beyond. And so here you can see how they're proposing what that might look like. With the placemaking, it's still a space to move through, but it also feels like a place to be. And then these are examples on the right-hand side that show how, they want to see Federal Hill almost as that view in the distance, and the water is the highlighted piece. And so these are two examples, kind of how you can activate the water at the end of the promenade and still have that view of Federal Hill be the prominent piece. Another major change was the modification to the Calvert Street entrance. So previously, this had kind of just been a path that wasn't highlighted, wasn't really talked about, and instead now it's a clear way to get to the promenade. The panel really appreciated this, as it's one of the few connections that it feels like you're being invited directly into the promenade. You can see it connects almost directly there, and nowhere else on this site does that happen. And it also kind of creates a buffer for the sale building. So as the sale building's imagined, it would be kind of an open market on the first floor with lots of vendors. And you could kind of utilize the space here at Calvert Street as a place to escape the sale building with your goods or whatever it might be. At B, this space has been expanded to have more of an area for people to gather, or as they maybe come in from these 4 different points, stand and figure out where they're going next, so you have that space to congregate. At location C and D, these were also changes recommended by planning staff to kind of shift the archway for the sale building so it centers the Constellation, and subsequently it now adds additional space for the back of house space within the sale building. And also D is kind of shifting the promenade, the lower promenade over, so as you exit the sale building, there's more space for people to gather. So here you can see some of that a little bit more close up, the shifting of the archway to center the Constellation through the arch, that additional space that's no longer the lower promenade where you can, exit the sale building, not feel cramped, and this more in-depth view of what that Calvert Street connection would be. And so here's some views of the changes to the sale building. An additional change at the request of the panel and staff was more space for pedestrians on the Pratt Street side. So a lot of the focus was the promenade, and rightly so, but there still needs to be people and movement on the north side of these buildings. And so it had felt tight previously. Let me see if I did. So I can see this is the what was proposed previously, where the frontage directly adjacent to the buildings varied. And then you could see more generous sizing for trees and the shared use path. That's been modified to have at least 20 feet for pedestrians. And then you have the shared use path, and this was made, they were able to capture this space by shrinking the space for the trees. It's still plenty of space, especially considering that these are linear. And everyone has felt comfortable, even the panelist on UDAP, who is a landscape architect and always asks questions about root space and root growth. So that's what I'm going to present about all of those UDAP hearings. That's highly condensed. So if I missed something that you think is critical, please let me know, and I can help answer that to the best of my abilities. I know the team is here as well. I was going to go over equity statement this hasn't changed much from the city council bills, to be honest, but I think it's important to talk about. So the impact of this master plan, so the Inner Harbor and any changes to it will impact every Baltimore resident, as well as residents of the wider region, visitors, and others. So as such, there are a large number of stakeholders who are both known and unknown, and they'll be impacted by this master plan. So the master plan will allow for a more resilient Inner Harbor. That's really critical as we consider, just recently the flooding that we've had. And it will allow for denser development than currently exists on the site. That's not something every stakeholder agrees is correct, so just putting that out there. The Inner Harbor has long been a unique location in the city. It attracts a diverse population from across the city as well as visitors, and it's a special place that hasn't been without its issues. Oftentimes in recent years, this is about a need to respond to youth who congregate here, who often don't have that third place that they need between home and school, and often this place acts as it. And so, this plan attempts to address that pattern of inequity and the needs that we see. And just another issue is affordable housing, which is a pressing issue throughout the city. And this would be required to meet the city's affordable housing requirements. So just putting it out there. For engagement, the development team has discussed the master plan effort at multiple public meetings since its release last October. For internal operations, the master plan will continue to require intense efforts by planning staff, similar to any large-scale planning and development effort. So this will include land use and design staff, community planners, and the Office of Sustainability. Notice of this item was emailed to over 100 individuals, as well as representatives from Downtown Partnership, Market Center CDC, City Center Residents Association, Downtown Residents Advocacy Network, and others. And so final feedback. The panel had comments in July, and those comments, even though the master plan review is complete, those comments still need to be addressed. So I'm going to go through some of those kind of overarching ideas. And then I'll get to my recommendation. So as the design of Pratt Street moves forward and the alignment of the red line is determined, the frontage of Pratt Street may have to be revisited. So that's just a critical element that I know the design team has in mind, but we always want it to keep at the forefront. And to date, no design work for Light Street has been coordinated with DOT. So the developer has expressed interest in eliminating the 5-lane cutoff between Light and Pratt and reconfiguring the Light and Pratt intersections. So these modifications have yet to be fully designed, and revisions to Light Street may have ramifications that have not yet been identified. There needs to be this work with DOT. Clarity on what parking will be provided and how it will be accessed, so if curb cuts are necessary, and how they impact traffic patterns, that needs to be provided. The team needs to complete the same level of detailed review for Conway and Camden Streets that have been completed at Calvert and South Street. So they've paid a lot of attention to the Pratt Street one as urged by staff, but now that same level of attention needs to be paid to Camden and Conway Street. They need to complete a more detailed study of how delivery services and back-of-house services will be integrated into the design of South Street. That still hasn't been fully answered, and I think that'll continue as the buildings develop. And make the office building truly integrated into the surrounding landscape, maintaining that proposed marsh landscape around the entire building. That change was really one of the things that made this final presentation so attractive and made the panel really comfortable with it. And so I think maintaining that and pushing it even further is a critical element. So the recommendation here is that the development team continue to work with planning staff to address comments from today. So from the commission, from the public, and from myself, as the individual buildings continue through the review process. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner McCoach?
I was wondering if we could call in the applicant.
I believe they're here, and I would welcome that.
Yes. That's kind of the whole point.
Commissioner Allen?
No questions right now, just thank you for a gigantic presentation. I don't have a better word, but I'm sure there is one. It's a lot of effort for you and the team and the staff, so thank you.
Commissioner Collins?
No questions at this time, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Horn?
You were talking about studies being completed. I didn't know if there was a traffic impact study completed yet.
No, there hasn't been, but DOT is completing, and maybe Director Ryer, you can speak to that.
Yeah, I'll take a whack. I mean, first of all, we have to wait for the alignment decision for the red line, because that could impact this greatly, as it's one of the alignment, Pratt Street is one of the alignments. So at that point, last year, DOT put substantial amount of money in the CIP for a traffic study. We've received the developer's traffic study. But we intend ours to work with the MTA and look at the entire downtown area, not just the area around Harbor Place. But that's not that it's not happening yet.
And I'll wait till later for the rest of my questions.
Commissioner Jolin?
No questions, thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
No questions, but in case if I missed the opportunity, I want to first recognize Caitlin and your effort, and Ren and the team. You mentioned in the equity section the intense effort from planning staff going forward, but even thus far, just want to recognize it, everything you had to do, wrangling weekly, and I can tell to get to this point, even just summarizing it, to do this work, to prepare this presentation, I'm sure it took a lot of work, so I personally appreciate it.
And thank you, Caitlin. Just a comment from me. Great presentation. I think that this, for me, represents a big step forward from, the information that the public reacted to earlier this year. And I think a big reason for that is because of the emphasis on the public space, the streetscape, the ground level things that the average person most frequently interacts with, as opposed to the previous focus that was really on the buildings themselves. So this for me provides a lot of clarity, and I think that's in part a credit to the thoughtful questions from staff at UDAP, as well as efforts from the development and design team. So great, and I look forward to hearing from them. Do we have anyone from the applicant who would like to add to Caitlin's wonderful presentation? And Miss, who are you?
Good afternoon. Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg, Mario Greenberg on behalf of the development team. I'll be very brief because I know you want to hear from everybody else in the room, but I do want to talk just very briefly about process, and I want to thank Caitlin as well for the tremendous work that has gone into this. I know this is not a small lift to put all this together, so we really do appreciate it. The last time we were here was in the fall. Of course, I'm not on, thank you. We were here in the fall twice to present the legislative package that went before the city council, and everybody wanted to talk about design at that time, but we weren't ready. We had some concepts, but we hadn't at all started this master planning process, and so we're excited to be here today to hear the commission's comments on the actual design now that we've gone through this extensive process. The legislative package passed the city council, and the charter amendment's going to go to the voters in November. And over the last several months, we have been working extensively with UDAP under the expert guidance of the planning department staff to help us get to a master plan that we are actually really proud of, which is the culmination of a lot of work. And I say culmination, but as Caitlin rightly pointed out, we still have a lot more design work to do on the individual sites, the individual buildings. And there's a whole host of further reviews that we're going to have to go through as we work through this process. Just because it was mentioned briefly, we have started the process with DOT. The right-of-way area on Pratt Street is part of the Downtown Rise master plan, so that we are coordinating with them, and that's going to be obviously a big part of what we're doing. So in essence, we're really excited to hear the commission's comments on the master plan. We wanted, after going through 4 meetings with UDAP, for the public to have another opportunity to hear a presentation on the master plan and to offer their feedback, because the public feedback isn't really a part of UDAP. So even though the commission isn't charged with making a formal approval today, we welcome your comments, and we hope that we'll have your support for the project. I'll turn it over to Mr. Bramble next.
Thank you, and good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Dave Bramble. I'm so tired of saying I'm the managing partner of MCB Real Estate, but I'm the managing partner of MCB Real Estate, and I'm here to really thank the Harbor Place team, and here we're a 3rd time, and this is a really exciting milestone, I think, for the future of Harbor Place and for the future of Waterfront and for the future of Baltimore. My purpose here is just to remind folks about the road we've taken to get to this moment. And as we promised and presented to the body last year, we have spent a ton of time on community engagement across the city. So we spoke to tens of thousands of residents representing over 100 of Baltimore's neighborhoods through large format meetings. They were done at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, the Waxter Senior Center, Harbor Place, Coppin State, the Federation for the Blind, and the Middle Branch Rec Center. We had small dinners at Harbor Place with Baltimore City residents. We hired youth workers to craft our youth engagement strategy. We knocked on over 1,000 doors. We met with so many stakeholders and invited anyone to submit their thoughts directly to us through our harborplace.com website. And as I frequently like to point out, we actually had signs on the sides of city buses telling you to reach out to us to talk about the project, whether you liked it or not, the things that you wanted changed, things that you thought were important, and we spent a lot of time trying to craft the project to reflect those things. And we really have contracted a world-class design team led by the Baltimore office of Gensler. Vaki is going to speak in a minute. Gensler is the world's largest architect, alongside a powerhouse team of designers, landscape architects, engineers, all headquartered here in Baltimore. We held an international design competition, which culminated with the selection of the world's most innovative architect of 2022. That's who ended up leading winning the design competition. And perhaps most importantly, we created a team that's truly reflective of our city. We hired local minority and women-owned firms, including our lawyers, lobbyists, consultants, and designers. And we're committed to maximizing minority and women-owned business participation and prioritizing the hiring of Baltimore City residents in all facets of the Harbor Place project. We went through the full legislative process, including multiple public hearings at this body and, of course, the City Council. And we're here today to move forward with the master plan for our waterfront. This plan not only reflects thousands of ideas, I mean thousands of ideas we received through community engagement, but it's been refined through the established city design review process with the Department of Planning and the UDOT panel. And you all know it's a big and heavy lift task. So we really want to thank Director Ryer and Ren and Caitlin from the Planning Department. And we know how hard this was, and it was a collaborative effort, and every conversation wasn't easy. But we also want to thank the UDAP panel for its input, which has enhanced the plan that you're evaluating today. It's not often that I say that at the end of a process. I feel like you made so many compromises, you don't end up with what you wanted. But in this instance, I think this collaborative process really did enhance this plan, and make it more clear, I think, to many people what we were trying to accomplish. And I think if you remember, the first UDAP panel didn't actually go that well. But the last one, I'm going to share a couple of quotes. The plan was called Visionary, with a sensitive feel and a careful approach. That was from Osborne Anthony. So exciting, varied, and interesting, and really looking great. It's from Kevin. A true destination with the harbor as a main feature, which has overall coalesced into an identity. That's from Sharon Bradley. And from Pavlina, what we have been looking for all along. And that's a long way from, did this get designed by ChatGPT? So we agree with those comments. And we thank you for all the work. And Commissioner McCoach, in December, you said you wanted to see a design review process play out so the commissioners wouldn't be making decisions. And we heard you. And we listened, and the refinements we think we have made in collaboration with planning have improved the plan. And we really do appreciate planning's recognition of this effort through their endorsement for approval that you've just heard. So we couldn't be more excited to deliver this transformational plan, a plan that catalyzes and puts our city on a trajectory for growth. But make no mistake, the years and efforts to date are only really truthfully getting us to the starting line, which is hard for me to say, but it's true. We have a long way to go. But if this body agrees and the voters of Baltimore City vote yes in November, which I sincerely hope and believe they will, then we will have earned as a team the privilege of embarking on the hard work of executing this vision. As hometown developers, Peter and I and the rest of the MCB team, we take this charge extremely seriously. And we hope that the efforts you've seen from our team and the time and effort and dollars we spent to date reflect that. So thank you, commissioners, for your time and consideration. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but I also would like for a chance for our lead architect, Vaki, to speak.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Vaki Moema. I am the co-managing principal of Gensler's Baltimore office. We are a group of planners, architects, interior designers, and strategists who love this community, which has been our home for nearly 30 years now. Our work focuses on creating places and spaces that are intended to enhance people's experience, to improve the environment, and to create new value. Some of our local projects include the ongoing design for the expansion of Baltimore Penn Station, the renovations that are currently occurring at M&T Bank Stadium, and Under Armour's world headquarters at Baltimore Peninsula. Globally, our firm is known for projects that are among some of the world's most innovative, such as the Shanghai Tower, the tallest LEED Platinum building in the world. We are extremely honored to be part of this team that also includes collaborators like BCT Architects, Unknown Studio, STV, the Traffic Group, RK&K, Biohabitats, Moffett and Nickel Engineers, Sultan Campbell Britton Associates, and from Copenhagen, Denmark, 3XN Architects. Inspired by Mayor Theodore McKeldon's vision of a downtown harbor with, quote, a panorama of buildings, parks, high-rise apartments, and marinas, end quote. And with the excellent ideas that were gathered from the community, our collective team established 7 core planning pillars for the Harbor Place project. 1, design for economic stability. 2, make it safe and welcoming. 3, embrace connectivity with the water. 4, make it accessible. 5, keep it local. 6, build equitably. And 7, design for resilience. So working together, we leveraged important insights from global cities such as Sydney, Copenhagen, Toronto, Washington, D.C., just to name a few, on successful waterfront development, with a focus on planning strategies that create safe, activated, walkable environments, best organized vertical development, waterfront development, I should say, activate the waterfront for community users. Our plan, we believe, reconnects downtown to its waterfront by extending the urban grid to the site. Adjacent streets have been reimagined and enhanced for safer pedestrian experiences with reduced traffic flow, the anticipation of the future Red Line, multimodal flow, and increased tree canopy shading. We see the promenade as an activated, multi-level experience that accommodates walking and gathering and allows the engagement with water. While the park at Freedom's Port, which is on your screen right now at the corner, will be a shaded urban oasis that recalls the Inner Harbor's original water's edge, commemorating the historic home of Baltimore's shipbuilding industry and maritime economy. For locals and visitors alike, this will be a place to celebrate biodiversity, universal accessibility, resilience, a place of education and of respite. Harbor Place, as we all know, was known for its innovative festival market retail. It's time to innovate again and evolve into a place where people live, work, play, and visit. That celebrates our authentic downtown Baltimore waterfront experience, that creates a safe, resident-occupied community that people can call home, and that connects people with the Inner Harbor like never before. Within Gensler, our plan is lauded as being among the most impactful and important urban waterfront revival projects in the world for its emphasis on creating a democratic urban experience while implementing planning strategies that help to make it a catalyst project for future development in the city. The vision that you've heard Caitlin walk us through and that you've heard David speak to is inspired by a Baltimore visionary. It has been informed by Baltimore residents. It honors our shared history. It works with our ecology. It has been developed in collaboration with Baltimore city planners, and it has been refined with the guidance of the Baltimore Urban Design and Architecture Advisory Panel. All of us own this vision together, and we offer it today to this commission for approval. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Questions? Those were excellent remarks. Thank you. Any questions from the commission for the development team? Commissioner Horn? Commissioner McCoach?
Michael last.
Okay. Doug?
Thanks. I moved over here to get a better view. It's apparent that there are many, many improvements, both large and small scale. Thanks very much. It's great to see a team that can listen. I have to say, I had just a few observations because at this stage of the game, I think that's the best thing to do is just to make a couple points. It's as we're looking at this as a master plan, and I know that this is hard, but considerations about access, I think pedestrian access you have addressed extremely well. And in fact, it's a much more transparent solution with a much better set of pedestrian experiences. Vehicular access, though, seems a little vague. But maybe that's the case because we don't really know what's going to happen with Pratt or Light Street, do we? So it's a master plan, right? And master plans evolve, right? This could take 10, 15 years to execute. I think you're going to have to answer these questions about the integration of our road network with your project, because I don't think they're really quite gelled yet. I look forward to that. Also, the question of parking. You guys have, over the past year, almost 9 months, have worked hard to maintain your flexibility in response to the parking question. And I get that. But I still expect there's going to be a podium below grade on the Light Street side. And I would expect there to be subterranean parking, and I expect there will be people that want to buy really nice units who don't want to park across the street. In fact, it'll harm your marketing if you say to that penthouse buyer or mid-floor buyer, oh yeah, you're parking over there. Don't mind, you take the elevator down, you wait for the light to change, you carry your groceries across the street. So I would appreciate some, I think that that's an issue that is going to need to be addressed, I think, in a open and transparent way as we move forward. And that's a part of a master plan. How do you approve a master plan without a parking solution? I think that I'm actually, I was reviewing your presentation before the meeting, and my thought was, wow, I guess the issue of the height just wasn't addressed. But at the same time, the city's provided you with height limits that you're within. So I think that as a result, your focus on the pedestrian experience is I think appropriate, as opposed to what's in the sky. What's on the ground is going to really have the more meaningful impact for our city's residents. But the one thing I would say related to the project and its execution is that it would also be a useful part of a master plan to show a sequence of execution. I don't think it's possible for you to put down a month and a year the different phases of your project will be executed. But I do think, and you should also probably want to define your cash flow on this project in terms of a sequence of construction. And I think that that would be also a very important part of a master plan, because a master plan predicts the future, and we need your help to understand what you're proposing for the future. And this comes to root, I think, again, for the benefit of our communities in terms of access and pedestrian access throughout the duration of construction. I would love to see, as one of your planning pillars, which I like, acknowledgement that this is going to be a major inconvenience for a lot of people for a long time. Road construction, lack of access to the water. At least in one manner, you have designed a great solution here. And I have to give you a lot of credit. I think the dual level promenade is quite nice. It's dynamic, it's interesting, it's exciting. I think it also has the potential, getting back to your construction sequencing, of offering waterfront access continuously for the extent of the entire project. If that floating walkway is constructed before you start major construction, all of our city residents can continue to have access to the water throughout this project. And I think you really ought to consider that. Other than that, I think it's a master plan. All of the buildings will be reviewed one by one. I think we will all wind up revisiting what is the sale building commercially, functionally, aesthetically. It's sort of an enigma right now. But you know what? In 2024, given the economy and the market for office, nobody's building the sale building next year. So this is one that I think I look forward to the master plan continuing to evolve. And those are my comments.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Allen?
I appreciate my colleagues' comments, and Thank you for your remarks and your responses to all of the feedback that you all have gotten. That goes for the team in-house as well. I'm eager to hear what those present in the audience have to say.
Commissioner Collins?
I want to thank our colleague for laying out very clearly a lot of things that have been on our mind and how things progress and the sequence of events which may need some tweaking at some point because time changes everything from year to year. But I do feel he's made some very valid and important points. I do want to compliment you on listening to a lot of voices who have a lot of different expectations for this beloved location. And I do appreciate the visualization and some of the visualization of access, how everything's going to be attached to the ground, so to speak, what that experience could and might be like, and how a variety of desires for this location can be accommodated. And I just wanted to compliment you on doing that. And I look forward as this continues to progress and to also hear what people have to say today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Jolin?
Thank you for this great presentation and seeing you once again with this project. I just want to make a comment on how much of the work that you've put into designing the public realm and the public space, which again, not a public entity, and doing that with the Planning Commission, with the Planning Department. So I just want to comment on that work is super, super important to see here, and just the access from the north to the south and to connect downtown to the harbor, I find really clear and important. So that's just the comment I wanted to make about the excellent work you've been doing in the public realm and the work that you've been doing with the community as well.
Deputy Mayor?
I have broader comments, I guess, maybe towards the end. I guess at this point, just want to thank the applicant and the team, especially MCB, for the work you've done with the community. And I see some of the vendors on Matriarch Coffee, and so the incredible work that you've gone above and beyond to recruit and bring in and offer very reduced price space to the vendors has been incredible, and it allowed for some vibrancy to happen, which I personally thought would not happen for 3 or 4 years till this was done. And so I'm excited to see that, and I appreciate the outreach you're doing and the kind of the risk you're taking on by even making the property open to the public, which you didn't have to do. Thank you for that, and I'm sure we'll talk more about the project after the comments.
I'll just make a couple of comments, echoing my colleagues without repeating everything that's been said. I do agree that phasing would be something very interesting to see down the road. And I just want to point out 2 specific, tangible, improvements that this plan represents that I think are really important. One of them is the connection at Calvert Street, which, Caitlin talked about, but that's going to be really transformational, that line of sight. And if you think about what a barrier that current triangle intersection is right now, I pass through there frequently, so that's going to have a huge impact and be really nice. And then additionally, connecting the Harbor Promenade around the World Trade Center so that it's not interrupted the way that it currently is. There's been so much, and some of it productive, but there's been a lot of critique about what has been proposed, here over the last year. And not, a single mention of mistakes in the past that could potentially be fixed. Like, we all just take the World Trade Center for granted because it's been there for however long. But there's numerous problems with the layout and the site around that building. Having passed through that pinch point on a bike with a stroller, it's kind of, could be a lot better. And so this design to me, represents some big improvements on what's out there now. I think that's great. Commissioner Horn, bring us home.
Just really fast, just want to thank the development team, one, for community engagement. Also, in terms of how you formed your team, really focusing on our small minority-based businesses. I think you should reflect on the feedback that Caitlin gave in the memo. I think there were 6 things that she said you should continue to work with. A particular thing for me is the completion of the traffic impact study. I know you've done that, but in your coordination with DOT and looking at a lot of the letters that we've gotten for this particular hearing, the completion of the traffic impact study came up, and so I would just urge that to be completed. But great job.
Thank you. Doesn't sound like there's any more questions for the team. Thank you all very much. All right, we're going to open up the public hearing now. If I could, may I see a show of hands, folks who are here to speak in support of this matter? In support first, could I see a show of hands? Great, and do we have any folks in the audience here to speak in opposition on this matter? Great, so we're gonna give everyone an opportunity to speak. I'm gonna ask those in favor to come speak first. I am gonna ask everyone to limit their remarks to no more than 5 minutes. Feel free to not use the whole 5 minutes. Sir, please start with introducing yourself.
Good morning, commissioners, or good afternoon. I'm stuck in the morning. I'm always stuck in the morning. My name is Michael Saunders. I'm one of the co-founders of Matriarch Coffee. I'm a current tenant at Harbor Place, and I'm coming to speak on behalf of and to support this Harbor Place master plan. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, in April, I signed a lease and I started my process of improving the space where I now operate. I looked outside that door every day. I saw people walk in and they ignored everything else. You know, they just kept walking by. And the moment that we opened up some things, people started coming. Now people are coming down here every day, looking for coffee, walking, looking to see what else is opening up, and it's refreshing. I think that people needed a reason to come back down. And in the process of building out this Harbor Place master plan, MCB engaged, like you said, this place impacts the whole city and state, and they engaged in that manner, all stakeholders who would have a say-so in this project. And they took the time and consideration and then the thoughtfulness to come up with this plan. And from what I can tell, from what I can feel, there's an excitement and there's a buzz about something new downtown. Some of the buzz is not always for the project. I mean, you know, everybody's not going to be pleased with this, but the overwhelming response that I've been receiving is, we can't wait for something new, something fresh. Have you seen the designs? And as a person who not only has a professional stakeholder, I have a personal stakeholder there, it feels great to me as well. I've spent the majority of my life at that corner of the Inner Harbor. This is my second iteration of a business life at that corner of the Inner Harbor. I had a car service there before. My dad was on the original paint crew of that of the Harbor Place, so I've been down there a lot over the last 49 years. So I'm just coming from a stakeholder who has personal and business stake at this, and I can tell you that I'm in complete support of this. And if you want, you can sit in my place and take the polls. People are in support of this. So. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. I can't wait to try your coffee.
Come on down.
Good afternoon, members of the commission and the commissioner. My name is Michael Middleton. I'm executive director of an organization known as SB7. It is a nonprofit corporation that emanates from the community benefits agreement that was developed with the Port Covington development, now known as the Baltimore Peninsula. I represent the communities of Cherry Hill, Westport, Mount Winans, Lakeland, Curtis Bay, and Brooklyn. So as you can identify, all of those communities are south of the Hanover Street Bridge. And what I've been impressed about in relationship to this development effort is that rarely do we have any type of development efforts in Baltimore City where folks south of the Hanover Street Bridge are consulted. This development team has done an excellent job of community engagement, of reaching out. We had a large meeting that was held at the Middle Branch Fitness and Wellness Center located in Cherry Hill. And a promise made by this group that will also attend our meeting of the SB7 in October of this year. One of the things as well that impressed me with this development is the opportunity and recognition that the Inner Harbor is not just a unique place for folk who live downtown. It is a place that belongs to all of us as citizens of Baltimore. I recall that one point, let me just back up for a second. I'm from a family of 12, and I have older brothers and sisters who are like in their 80s, 85 years old. And every Saturday, I pick up my 2 older brothers to go down to Silver Spring to play pinochle. The pinochle game, double deck, in fact. And as I bring my 2 older brothers down, and we take St. Paul Street over to Light Street, and you look over to your left, and the thing they say is, we are blessed to have a harbor, but you can't see it, nor can you see the people around it. And I'm so impressed in relationship to this development that it brings and it welcomes people in, and that you'll be able to view the water and the promenade as you go through. I ask that the nature of the community engagement process continues. It's been done, and I encourage you to approve this measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello again. 9 months later. My name's Emma Stokes, and I've lived within a 15-minute walk of Harbor Place for most of the 40 years I've been in Baltimore. And thank you for this opportunity. I just want to give you an update. I've been working very hard, self-appointedly, and I have 2 experiences that have continued to move me along this somewhat tortuous role. I sometimes feel excited and positive, and sometimes I didn't. So I've had 2 kinds of experiences in the last 8 months or 9 months. I've gone over to visit that modest-sized corner I now call Harbor Place about 25 times, particularly with the better weather. And as described the last time, Harbor Place has been a major part of my life and my sense of well-being for a long, long time. So at these visits, it's felt somewhat reminiscent of how it had been until about 2015 when the deterioration set in and bankruptcy happened, et cetera. I actually had places to go. There were shops open. I could eat and drink. I could view art. I could listen to music and more. And my major objective was also to continue this field testing that I like to do. You'll see this book I got them to give me at some point. I've really been studying lots of aspects because the plan asserts, and then the critics also assert certain kinds of things. And at first, some of the MCB proposal was at deep odds with my sort of visceral response to high buildings, for instance, as well as my preferences. Parenthetically, though, these experiences, these 25 experiences, I really want to praise both the Waterfront Partnership and the MCB organization to have done so many things to give us something to do in the meantime, and have these 20 aspiring entrepreneurs in their pavilions. So my many experiences along, and I'll emphasize the sun-drenched promenade. It's really hot over there sometimes, and I appreciate this big shade idea. But going over there and having the experiences has really truly rendered greater clarity and certainty about what I think downtown Baltimore requires and what both the locals and the visitors crave. This mixed-use plan and design for these several acres along the waterfront meets that requirement and that craving. It's going to create a balance of appealing attractions, desirable dwellings, and enhanced dynamic and innovative green spaces. Again, the big green thing really pleases me. And I've gotten very involved in this notion about parks, and actually, this idea of greater parks is fabulous, but Baltimore is blessed with vast areas of parks, over 4,000 acres. So in some ways, it sort of puts the need for parklands in perspective at Harbor Place. And we also have Rashfield Park developing. Probably the most important feature of this Harbor Place plan is that it embraces sustainability, both economic and environmental. I've sort of arrived at a reckoning with the realities for a thriving downtown and for having Harbor Place again. A huge factor, one of economic viability, that is so very desperately needed in this area of Baltimore, really forced me to have a reality check and reordering of my own preferences and assessment. Sad as it might be, and I really found it when I spent a lot of time this last couple of months, the layout and function of the pavilions are just not going to succeed. And luckily, we have this whole new plan. The other experience I've had to help inform the testimony today and where I'm standing is I went over to the wharf in Washington just to see another developed waterfront. And honestly, it really made each element of this Harbor Place plan much more exciting. Their promenade was sort of narrow, slightly landscaped. The use of the buildings was sort of boring. I mean, they just sort of went on forever, and gave a sort of stodgy blocked effect. But our buildings are going to have greater connectivity with the water and creativity and sort of apt fitting efficiency for that space. I continue to be really intrigued, inspired, and stunned by the Sale building, as they call it, the elevated neighborhood landscape. I just think it's a clever proposed arrangement of a marketplace, culinary, opportunities, entertainment, venues, even curved terraces for green space. It's clever design. It enhances waterfront views. And back to the what my predecessor said, the striking difference in this proposed waterfront design and greater creativity, connectivity to the water, with the first floors of all the buildings having glass walls and really those nicely placed corridors. So it's very exciting. I just am dreading the fact that this could really take 15 years because I'm approaching my 80th birthday and I'm trying my best to stay healthy.
Well, I must say you look great, Ms. Stokes.
Smoke and mirrors and makeup.
You've got about 30 seconds if you've got any final remarks.
Yeah, so I really basically want to say that this has been a demanding process for me, but it's challenged my learning, it's tested my assumptions, and exposed my personal and historic preferences. Been very thought-provoking and taxing at times, but I really have come full, 180 degrees. I support this master plan, and I think your approval of it holds even greater resonance for me than when we last met. So thank you for listening. This has been an exciting process. I'm wowed by your work. And as I say, I just have to keep living healthy to enjoy all this.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stokes. I must say, I appreciate not only your testimony today, but your open-mindedness and your diligence and your enthusiasm. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Ava Hodston. I am an asset manager for Trademark Properties. We specialize in historic adaptive reuse of long vacant or underutilized buildings. Beyond that, personally, I am a resident of downtown. I live in the Central Business District, just a couple blocks from the Inner Harbor, and I spend a lot of my personal time in the Inner Harbor. My professional hours are spent dedicated to revitalization of downtown and bringing long vacant buildings back to life. And personally, I spend a lot of time around the Inner Harbor and have seen MCB's commitment to revitalizing the pavilions and their demonstration to this site and the importance it serves in the community. I have been engaged as a resident in their charrettes and community outreach. I have given my feedback and I have been listened to. I believe that MCB has taken a lot of input from the community, from stakeholders, and from residents, and put lots of consideration into these plans, and I'm fully supportive of the master plan that they've presented.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We catch your last name, I'm sorry.
Hodston. H-O-D.
I had that right.
That was close.
Yeah.
Sir?
Good afternoon, commissioners, and thanks for hearing my testimony. My name is Steve Marker. I am a recovering architect. I am an active real estate developer of senior living communities in Maryland and the Northeast. I am a business executive of a company based in the Central Business District, employing over 200 people in the city. I also live just east of Harbor Place. So this space is part of my daily life. It's part of my commute. It's where I recreate, and its future is important to me personally. I'm here today to support the MCB master plan. I think this plan and investment is representative of the world-class city that Baltimore is. It shows the potential of our public spaces to be activated and safe. It shows the potential of this density to create an environment that is activated through all times of day, all days of the week, which is something that the current use of this space does not currently allow. This vision represents the type of place that I not only would choose to recreate in my personal time with my husband and friends, but also an asset of this city that would be very attractive to us as a business. As a business, we are constantly looking for the top talent to attract to Baltimore to come work with our organization. And this type of investment in our city is critical to bringing in the best talent and growing our city in a sustainable way for the long term. This plan makes me very excited for the future of our city, and I encourage you to support this plan and move this process forward to allow MCB to bring it to life. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm Jennifer Vey. I'm the Executive Vice President for Policy and Research at the Greater Baltimore Committee. And I'm coming here on behalf of our CEO, Mark Anthony Thomas, and the Greater Baltimore Committee, and standing in strong support of the master plan for Harbor Place that we've been discussing here today. So prior to joining GBC, not quite a year ago, I spent 22 years studying urban economic development at the Brookings Institution, with a particular focus on how investments in land development, in places, in place-making can create more vibrant and inclusive and prosperous communities. And so from my own research for those decades and that of many, many colleagues in the field, we know that density and walkability and investments in transit and resilient infrastructure are absolutely critical elements for catalyzing economic growth and supporting businesses in our urban centers. Such investments, as we've been discussing here today, are also vital to fostering communities that nurture our social and our physical well-being while also supporting environmental sustainability. MCB's plans for Harbor Place encompass essentially all the elements that I would recommend for a transformative waterfront project such as this. Together, they will bring people back to downtown, which is, as I think we all recognize, is so crucial to the health of our city, to bring them back to work, to recreate, and importantly, as the plan encompasses, to live. GBC's focus on creating a stronger, our primary focus is on creating a stronger and more prosperous Baltimore region. A healthy and vibrant downtown and a healthy and vibrant Baltimore City is absolutely essential to creating that outcome, and this master plan is really important to helping us get there. And for these reasons, I ask the Commission to continue your support of this important project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vey.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matt Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of the Baltimore Convention Center. It's great to be here today. Thank you to the Commission for hearing my testimony today. I'm here to voice my support for the MCB Master Plan for Harbor Place and surrounding waterfront. My primary focus is to emphasize the critical need for a revitalized inner harbor to attract convention business to Baltimore. This is the second time our agency has voiced support for this plan here, as we see it as a once-in-a-generational opportunity to recharge downtown, with its ripple effects helping all facets of the tourism and hospitality industry, with a special huge impact on our ability to lure meetings and conventions back to Baltimore. Since my return to the Convention Center as Executive Director in January of 2023, there has been an unparalleled amount of momentum, passion, and collaboration amongst business and civic leaders around what downtown Baltimore needs to be. The $6.9 billion of capital investment in downtown requires everyone to work in sync to ensure a cohesive downtown product for citizens and guests. One of, if not the most important pieces of that puzzle, is the work being done surrounding Harbor Place. As the Inner Harbor is a central part of the Mayor's Downtown Rise platform, engagement around this master plan has been vast, and MCB's adaptations to that feedback has not been immaterial as seen by the presentation today. We see added vibrancy, added green space, and a more authentic Baltimore than the swaths of empty storefronts and generic national chains that inhabit it in recent years. I am acutely aware of the challenges Baltimore faces in maintaining its status as a premier destination for national and regional conventions. The continued degradation of Baltimore's downtown product and its resulting lack of vibrancy at the street level especially has significantly damaged the city's reputation to our national clients and hinders the Baltimore Convention Center's ability to fulfill its mission of generating positive economic impact, creating jobs, and serving the community. But that damage is not irreparable. In fact, as an example, the BCC is partnering with local artists to help bring more of Baltimore's culture to the downtown corridor through murals and public art. Just a few weeks ago, we partnered with PNC and the Orioles to bring a big mural to the side of our building. From Ocean City to Portland, Oregon, I have seen and received direct feedback about the positive imagery impressions that just a simple mural in downtown can be. Just imagine this being fulfilled, what that could do for the impression of not just the national convention footprint, but international as well. Further, Baltimore was just chosen to be the host city for the 2033 American Society of Association Executives. So yes, that's the Association for Associations. But in reality, that's the Super Bowl of what we do. That's the ability to have over 5,000 decision makers for groups that could choose Baltimore. And it's not one that's easily won. We did that by pitching hard about what the forward momentum of Baltimore can bring to us. And at the center of that imagery was MCB's master plan. And I was in that pitch room, and it certainly was the ooh and the ah that really truly helped to close that deal and choose Baltimore for one of the host years. In my opinion, the city cannot afford to delay the revitalization of the Inner Harbor. The proposed plan is a catalyst for Baltimore's resurgence as a leader in convention destinations. The loss of business the center that we're personally experiencing right now underscores the urgency of moving this forward. I implore the Commission to move favorably on this item without delay to ensure the citizens of Baltimore have the opportunity to vote in November on this referendum. Thank you.
Thank you for that very important perspective from the Convention Center.
Good afternoon, members of the commission and community. My name is Kanera Wagstaff, and I'm here representing Truth Avenue, and that is a resource hub dedicated to empowering the youth of Baltimore by providing them with the tools, resources, and opportunities to generate wealth, foster innovation, improve health, and cultivate culture. At Truth Avenue, we are committed to creating a dynamic environment where the next generation can thrive, learn, and lead. Our mission is to ensure that every young person in our city has the chance to transform their future and their community. We see the Harbor Place Master Plan as a critical step towards achieving that goal. The revitalization of the Harbor Place presents an incredible opportunity to create a space where the young entrepreneurs and visionaries of Baltimore can showcase their talents and contribute to the economic and cultural vitality of our city. By integrating Truth Avenue into this master plan, we can bring our vision to life, and that is to be the leading hub where young people can access the knowledge, support, and inspiration to drive economic, social, and cultural growth. We believe that with the development of the Harbor Place, we can establish a vibrant center that not only boosts local commerce, but also serves as a beacon of opportunity for young people across Baltimore. Our vision is to see every young individual empowered to create meaningful change, achieving their full potential while contributing to a vibrant, sustainable future. In closing, I urge you to support the Harbor Place Master Plan. This initiative aligns perfectly with the mission and vision of Truth Avenue, and it will play a vital role in helping us and our youth to build a stronger, more prosperous Baltimore. Together, we can transform Harbor Place into a thriving, inclusive space that benefits all members of the community, especially our young entrepreneurs and leaders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wagstaff. Sir?
Good afternoon, members of the commission. I'm John Laria, former managing partner at Ballard Spahr Law Firm, now special counsel at the firm. I think I'm here representing the non-youth of Baltimore. I've appeared before this commission many times on legislative and policy matters and as counsel to numerous applicants. For disclosure, I do represent MCB and other matters, but today that counsel role is filled ably by my counterpart, Caroline Hecker, from whom you've heard earlier. But I am here today in my capacity as chair of something called Baltimore for a New Harbor Place. That is a Maryland ballot issue committee formed to support the passage of the Inner Harbor Charter Amendment on November 5th. I'm also here as a longtime Baltimorean who has watched with despair the decline of such an important city asset to the point where it is not just non-contributing, but truly an albatross around our hopes and ambitions for downtown. When I first came to Baltimore in 1981 as a Johns Hopkins freshman, hoping to be a pre-med, different story, different day, there was nothing more exciting than Harbor Place. Its spiffiness complemented Baltimore's enduring and endearing grittiness, an example of that familiar and unusual balance that makes Baltimore so special to all of us. But as the city continued to change around it, Harbor Place remained an important anchor because of its visibility and its central location. And I have to say, never did I think that Harbor Place could go from the asset it was to the liability that it is today. It's truly shocking. I was managing partner of our firm when about 5 years ago, our longtime office lease was expiring on Lombard Street and we had to decide where to go. We looked all around the city and ultimately we decided to remain in the central business district on Pratt Street because we felt the city needed that kind of commitment from businesses like ours, and others have followed suit, and that's been terrific to watch. But I'd be lying if I said that the condition of Harbor Place just outside our front door was not the subject of discussion and even some dissent, and that it perhaps needed a little bit of friendly persuasion for us to make the commitment to relocate as we did in the CBD. So for this and other reasons, business leaders like me first encouraged the city to intervene, but the truth is that the city's legal options are limited. Eminent domain was even discussed, but people often forget that eminent domain is not free, and there were no resources to acquire this very expensive asset, and frankly, probably no civic or political appetite to pay the prior owner, which had acted so incredibly irresponsibly. So enter Dave Bramble and MCB. Dave took the risk to acquire the property when nobody else would, and he has continued to invest in a process and a plan that should make us all proud. So when the Inner Harbor Charter Amendment was set to go on the November ballot, I volunteered to help lead it, ultimately became chair of the ballot issue committee that I mentioned a moment ago. But today's not, as you know, about the charter amendment. That's already received unanimous approval from this commission. It is, of course, about the master plan. And over the years, I've been privileged to appear before you many times, including on master plans and other project approvals. And I've always been impressed by the commission's insistence, no matter the planning director, no matter the commissioners, and I've seen plenty of both, I've always been impressed by the commission's insistence on a comprehensive, inclusive, and rigorous process, which is the best, if not the only way to get the right result. And that is exactly what has happened, as you've seen today and over the last meetings with respect to the Harbor Place Master Plan. As you've heard, MCB took unprecedented steps to ensure that people were heard, and your process, including extra bonus UDAP meetings, made the project even better, as you can tell from the UDAP panelist comments that Dave quoted earlier. The Commission and the city really should be proud of the plan that is before you today, and so I urge your continued support and approval. With your support, with master plan approval, with the voters' approval of the ballot question in November, we can together help MCB return Harbor Place to its rightful place as a true civic and community asset for downtown and for the entire city. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you for your work.
Thank you, Mr. Laria. All right, I think we've got some additional speakers.
Those against?
Yes, sir. Feel free, step right up. Please introduce yourself for the record.
30 minutes, right?
Well, you are outnumbered, so.
Tell you, that young lady, where is she? That spoke almost convinced me to support this project. Where is that young lady? Anyhow, my name is Tony Ambridge. I was a member of this commission for 14 years. I was a member of the city council. I was a real estate officer. Started working for the city with Tommy D'Alessandro III. And in fact, John Laria was my campaign manager in 85 or 87. He didn't say he was only 19 when he graduated from Hopkins. But Chris, the chairman asked about underlying zoning. The land use is a right. If it's permitted, it's a right. You can't take it away unless you condemn it. And Mr. Tissot, who I think his first project when he came to Baltimore was mine when I bought the what's called Nick's Fish House. So I have a history here. I know I look pretty good for my age. But Mr. McCoach isn't here. He had some very valid questions that I'd like to raise. Now, what troubles me most about this fine development team that they have is that it put the cart before the horse. In other words, the city council in their wisdom passed legislation that was illegal. I mean, the charter does not allow these uses. I'm sure you realize that. That's not me, is it? With the zoning and the urban renewal ordinance being repealed by referendum, then it's legal. But in my opinion, I'm not an attorney, but it's just putting the cart before the horse. And it was also mentioned, there was a lot of, I've been through 100 of these. I chaired the hearings for everything developed from Harbor Place down to Fells Point and Harbor View. So usually all this work is done before approval of legislation, before. Marcia certainly knows. She sat through all those boring city council meetings. It just boggles my mind that it was done ass backwards. It's just, excuse my language. But some questions. Who will be owning this project? I know that the developer is an asset manager. Will they be owning it? It's important for us to know who our neighbors are. What if the referendum fails? What will they do with the property? I read in the paper that they would just abandon it or turn it over to the bank. What if there is no money from the taxpayer, the $400 million? Given the budget crisis we have, the red line. If we have to wait for the red line approval to know what will be the traffic jam. Interestingly enough, when I went to Cherry Hill, and I live north of Mount Vernon, to go to Cherry Hill to hear one of these presentations, it took me an hour to get from Franklin Street to Key Highway because of the traffic jam. Now they want to reduce it by 2 lanes on Pratt and I would like to see what will happen. And of course, it was mentioned about parking. Has there been a performer? Has there been a market analysis? Has there been a letter of interest from a lender? Will this thing actually ever be built? Now, how would you like it if you bought season tickets at the Ravens and suddenly Andre the Giants bought the seats in front of you and stood up the whole game? But that's what you're going to have here. This was designed as a bowl. that lend value to those subsequent properties behind it. Hyatt Regency, Mayor Schaefer and Larry Reich went personally to meet Mr. Pritzker to beg him to build that thing. Now there'll be buildings right in front of it. And I am happy to see some concessions were made, that the open space is a little more deliberate, not just completely shaded. So here we have a team who bought a property, highest and best use. It's valued according to its highest and best use, which was 2 50-foot buildings. So now comes a request, give us the 3.6 acres and $400 million and close the streets. So that's a good score. I don't know how good it will be for the city, but these are important unanswered questions that I would like to know before I vote on this referendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambridge. Any questions for the speaker?
My name's Jim Prost. I moved to Baltimore in 1972 after graduate school, and one of the first projects I worked on was the Harbor East Urban Renewal Project. Nice to hear Larry Reich and Mayor Schaefer's name mentioned, and that's who I worked with. And I would love to see the harborfront redeveloped and be revitalized and like it used to be. But that's not what happened. It is the cart before the horse. A little bit of public investment in political funding resulted in someone being vested, being allowed to develop 1.5 million square feet of development with very little limitations on what they could do and not do. Getting $400 million worth of public sector assistance to help make that project happen. Just think what $400 million invested in a waterfront park could do. It may not get you a high-rise residential development. It may not get you an office building in a public park. And I already saw the illusions that you're struggling with. What in the hell is this office building doing in the middle of a waterfront public park? You make this proposal, you give this vested rights, you imply $400 million worth of public assistance, but you haven't evaluated the traffic, you haven't evaluated pedestrian access, you haven't evaluated public transportation access, you haven't really evaluated resiliency. You're going to raise one level up to 10 feet and pray that environmental changes and global warming does not impact it, but you really haven't done the evaluation. We need, and then I'm hearing that most of the effort is to try to make the buildings that are proposed to be in a more park-like setting. Damn it, they're in a park. This is a park. It is the front door of Baltimore City. I'd love to see development, but the development pays secondary attention to the attraction and the revitalization of the waterfront that has to address parking and transportation issues. The whole equity impact, I'm reading here, we really want housing affordability, and the developer proposes high-rise residential. That doesn't get housing affordability. We need something for the youth. And I'm sure the youth of Baltimore is really interested in high-rise residential development and a high-rise office building and a public park along the waterfront. That will really help the youth of Baltimore. Maybe they'll get some jobs cleaning, becoming janitors or whatever. The equity impact of this, where is the public benefit agreement? Where is the implication of a public benefit agreement? This is run by a developer for the benefit of a developer. He has wonderful ideas. Some of the plans I think are great, but it's the cart before the horse. We're trying to revitalize Baltimore. We're trying to get a catalytic development in Baltimore. Baltimore, by the way, ranks 67th of the top 100 cities in the country in terms of per capita park space. And the reason it ranks that high is everybody else's population is going up and our population is going down. So we have more per capita space every year without adding any space because we have less people living here. What I would like to see is a true revitalization of the waterfront and the surrounding area to the benefit of the residents. There's some great concepts in the plan, and I think development, whether it's partially in the park or whether it's in land owned by the developer immediately adjacent to the park that doesn't take away the parkland or doesn't adversely impact the park in terms of adding 1.5 million square feet in a very small public park along the waterfront. So yes, redevelopment, but this particular plan and this particular cart before the horse to work with the developer to see how we can make 900 residential units and 20-story office towers work along the waterfront, and we'll build an 8,500 square foot retail pavilion. That's what it says. Okay, I mean, you can have all the retail on the ground floor of the sale building. You can have all the retail entertainment uses on the ground floor of residential towers and office towers, but it needs to be for the benefit of the citizens of Baltimore, the parkland for the benefits of the city of Baltimore, the uses for the benefits of the city of Baltimore residents and visitors to Baltimore City, not a proposal that's driven by the private sector trying to do the investment returns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Probst.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking comments. I didn't know that I was going to be able to speak, so as I just have a little piece of paper, as my neighbor here referred to. This is the jewel of our city.
Your name, miss?
My name is Sandra Seward. I'm a resident of Federal Hill. The harbor is a jewel of our city. I was one of the people that went around getting signatures to stop the towers in Baltimore, and in 6 weeks, we got 9,921 signatures from residents in Baltimore. And I want you to know that a lot of people weren't even sort of aware of this project because it has gone through so quickly. And I was in Lexington Market speaking with people about it, and they're saying, they're going to take our harbor? Really? Okay? So people don't really understand this project. And I want to say that MCB, maybe there are some good things about it, but I think, like John Waters said, it's going to be like a fake Inner Harbor East. We don't need more tall buildings and apartment buildings at the harbor. Has anyone asked the kids of Baltimore what they would like to see? If you've gone to the High Line in New York, the Sydney Opera House, most places that are, the Vietnam Memorial, that was an international contest, not a backroom deal that was made between the mayor and a developer to give this away for a very little bit of money. And the only reason he will do it is if he can have these 32-story towers. Have you looked at how tall 32 stories are? It's really high. It's going to impact everything about the harbor. This should be an international contest with architects from around the world being able to give input on what is down at the harbor. Then charrettes with people in our city looking at what we want. And then the last part of that is the developer. That's the last person to come into this. And in this city, it's the first. Have you gone up Charles and Calvert and seen how many empty buildings we have? How about the gallery? How about the other buildings across the street MCB owns? I mean, there's so much to look at here, and I think this was railroaded through. I would love to see, we are waiting to see, what is this referendum going to look like? Revitalization of Harbor Place? Yes, I think we all want to see revitalization. I went to a meeting at the Renaissance Hotel with a panel of architects who presented on this topic. New York City, Barbara Wilkes came down, other people. They presented amazing things that have been done on waterfronts for far less money. $150 million, beautiful water features for kids to play in. I love the concept of renovation. I think we can look at this quickly and do other things with it, and it won't be 10, 12 years and a mess at our harbor with huge rats running around that they're going to dig up. I agree with some of we need renovation, but when ships are visiting our harbor or they're having a wine festival, it is packed down there. People want to be down there. They don't want to go down there to see an apartment building. The convention center, I don't see that as a selling point. Come visit Baltimore to see another apartment building on the harbor, okay? Head over to Harbor East, you can see a lot of them there. I'm just very disturbed by all of it and feel like we've lost so much of our voice in Baltimore. Things just are railroaded through. It's a very strong mayoral model here. This never should have happened and gotten to this point. These drawings, really, if we don't give him 32-story buildings and a business building, they don't want to do this project. This is a money-making deal. To put a lot of trees around it and say there are going to be a lot of trees, so what? Have we asked people of Baltimore, what do you want at Harbor Place? And in terms of speaking to communities, in July, we had a meeting, and MCB was supposed to come, and the Inner Harbor Forum came too. Guess what? Last minute, MCB did not come. You know why? The press was there. If you listened this week, Tom Hall had the Inner Harbor Forum, and MCB was invited to speak. Guess who didn't show to speak on the Tom Hall show? MCB. So there's a lot of, smoke and mirrors with a lot of trees in this setting, but really, it's about apartment buildings. And I don't think that's what Baltimore needs. And I really hope that even the people here that spoke in favor of it reconsider, yes, let's renovate, but let's really look at this and make this an international contest. And I hope people vote no in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Seward. Is there anyone else to speak this afternoon?
Good afternoon. I'm Sue Carlin, and I want to first thank Caitlin for making communication accessible for me. I'm hard of hearing, and I want to thank you. I am in opposition of the current MCB plan. I want to see MCB come back and really listen to what a lot of people that I've seen in this room at these charrettes. No one said we want to see high-rise luxury apartment buildings. Not one person. Anyway, I am a condo owner, and I'm 2 blocks away from the Inner Harbor, and I walk there every day, and it gets activated when we have visiting ships. It gets activated when we have the different festivals, like the Wine Festival, the German Christmas Festival. We can do more of that, make it more of an entertainment. That's what people and visitors, and we need those visitors to come. We need to improve our tourism, and they don't come to see tall, high-rise apartment buildings. Even if you make portions of them affordable, it's not enough. We have plenty of empty buildings downtown that can be repurposed. I lived in one a few years back that was a building I worked in for 14 years and was transformed into an apartment building. We can do more of that. MCB owns property adjacent to Harbor Place that I say, this is my opinion, demolish the pavilions. That opens up the space, and then guess what? MCB can do their development and still have great views of the water. And that's really all I have to say. I do agree with everything that Mr. Probst said, Mr. Ambridge. I even like some of the things Ms. Stokes said too. But I appreciate the commission listening to everyone here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Carlin. And I would like to, anyone else jumping up before we close the public hearing? Sir?
My name's George Frazier, and
I'm sorry.
I appreciate the commission hearing my testimony.
Is that George?
Pardon?
Could you say your name one more time?
It's George Frazier. My concern sitting here is that there are a lot of other neighborhoods in Baltimore that are actually have apartment buildings that have been recently built that are empty. Chasen Development is going broke in my neighborhood, and there's all construction has stopped. I am surrounded by these buildings, and if you go down Boston Street, you see another parade of apartment buildings. And I'm really concerned that it will suck the resources, both planning resources of Baltimore City government into this one project, and all the other projects and all the other parts of Baltimore will be neglected. And I worry about the resources of Baltimore City government to deliver, and worried that it will suck resources into this one project at the loss of others. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Anyone else? All right, that closes today's public hearing. We're not going to have a vote on this issue. So before we close, I just want to thank everyone. You know, the applicant, the MCB team has been, you know, rightfully commended for their public engagement. But I'd also like to commend everyone else, present and not present, you know, the public, for the engagement that they've participated in through the numerous meetings here at the Planning Commission, out in the community. Because as I believe, you know, we are seeing the impact and the benefit of that robust process. You know, when we approved the legislative action for this to go to the ballot in November, you know, I supported this project knowing that the design wasn't finished, but that we were headed in the right direction. And a lot of what I see here and a lot of what I've heard in the testimony really validates that for me. You know, another thing I would just like to mention, just like Ms. Stokes, you know, since we started these hearings, I've made a point of myself going down to Harbor Place more often. And I've seen some of the great activation that I think Ms. Carlin mentioned about some of the existing activities and events that are down there, and that's great. But I think some misconstrue that as a reason to not have change, because, you know, the harbor's good as it is, and I think there's a lot of us who feel that we can have all of that and better. I'd like to also point out, as was commented by a few people today, you know, the way that the current landlord has activated the space and even improved the existing pavilions by putting tenants in there, by having more events and bringing people to the harbor. So we are moving in the right direction, but that's no reason not to go further. And just lastly, you know, when weighing the pros and cons of the proposed design, you know, the building height was something that a lot of people raised and something that I thought about carefully. And I remember being down there on a sunny day one time, looking at the shadow from the tall blue building that's across Light Street there, and what I was surprised to find is that people were actually seeking out the shade because it was so hot in the sun. It was like you were looking for a building to stand next to or trees. So to see the big shade idea incorporated in the design, really, I think is right on. So again, I just want to thank everyone. It's been a long and productive process. It's not over yet, but thank you.
Thanks. Well, you should get more, take other comments too. I guess, yeah, I've thought about the height issue raised by people in the community and then thinking about people's views being blocked. And I've been frustrated because I think the commentary out in the public has not reflected the reality that there's no one's view being blocked except for the height, which was a deal that Schaefer made that was not open and transparent. It worked out well for the city, I believe, but that's one of those deals he wanted as a do-it-now kind of guy, got it done. But that's also an older design that needs a fresh take there. I think, I really appreciated, like you mentioned, too, the view corridor being opened up on the World Trade Center side and the UDAP work to make them study the extra residential on the office building demonstrated why it wouldn't work there. And I like the thoughtfulness of having the residential piece going towards Light Street down to Federal Hill to be cohesive where there's more residential, and then thinking about Pratt Street being more commercialized and how to activate that. I'm influenced, obviously, on behalf of the mayor, so the mayor strongly supports this, but thinking about the city's downtown area is that, as Matt Campbell mentioned, director of the convention center, so much of the downtown economic base is about tourism, and this being the crown jewel and being a thoughtful design is great, but when there's not conventions, there's not tall ships, there's not a German festival every weekend, we need something else to keep people here. And that's why you have housing and different types of activation to get people there 24 or 365 and not just once every 2 years when there's a tall ship in town.
Yeah.
So for that, I really support this effort. I really love the placemaking and then hope that comes to fruition with even the wetlands outside. I went to school in Providence and saw the water fire there. That was great to get people out on the water. So the more we can do with that, I'm excited to see.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Commissioner Horn, anything to add?
Just want to thank everybody who came to speak today, both for in opposition and support. Your opinion matters to us, and we value your feedback to the developer. I think you've done a good job of community engagement, but I also encourage you to continue your feedback loops so that the community can know how you are addressing their concerns, because I think you are. And so the more you interact with community, I think the better. Then the last thing is just a traffic impact study. If we can get that done, I think that will address a lot of what I heard today.
Just a quick comment. I think what we had hearings back in the fall of last year, late last year.
Time flies.
Yeah. And I know a couple times comments were made, you made it, I made it, that the youth are who, and I know Marcia and I talked about this, and I believe you stated this as well during a hearing. The young people, I have young adults who are in their 30s, but looking beyond them, people who are kids now who will be teenagers soon, or whatever ages they might be, their interests are different from what ours were when I was there as a young adult when Harbor Place opened as it is currently in '81, I believe it was. And that's what propelled me to shift to being able to take this in as an interesting possibility. This is not about, for me, funneling through what my experiences have been, but what are younger people interested in doing. I take umbrage a little bit at the comment about what are young people going to derive from the high rises. I was a young person who was interested in architecture from age 8. And just to be exposed to, and some people don't get the exposure that I was blessed to have, privileged to have as a youngster. Just to be exposed in a public place such as Harbor Place
some of them do not get to Harbor East. There's no draw there for certain segments of the population in Baltimore City. But people love Harbor Place even when it's at its least. Not the best way to put that, but I see all kinds of potential for young people to derive from seeing housing at Harbor Place in addition to whatever else might come there. Some of them might want to open businesses, pop-up shops, anything. There are all kinds of things that would inspire them. And I think it's insulting personally to say they could only consider being janitors in the high-rise housing there or the offices there. You don't know what inspires young people, and you can't knock out the possibility that what might just be mundane and a given to you is not something. Yes, absolutely. That has been a huge part of the engagement of MCB. And so I actually did want to touch on that point. I don't need to address it in full. There's information on their website, but they have done huge engagement with young people. And the final point I wanted to touch on was if there are people who are just now finding out what the plans are, I would hope that everyone encourages them to seek out the information. It's been in the Banner. That's the paper I tend to read. I'm sure it's been in the Sun paper. I don't have a subscription to that, but I do see headlines from time to time. My dad reads it, and we talk about things. So I know it has been covered. Perhaps people need to seek out the information, pay a little more attention to what's on the news or Google.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to everyone who was patient and waited to have their opportunity to speak. We've had multiple meetings on this particular project, and that's to be expected. It is in a central location. It is a beloved location for many people who had their own experiences with the area, and watched it develop over time. I look at this as an opportunity because, unfortunately, this area went through some very bad management, and that has had a crushing effect on this location and people's concerns about the city. And I think that we look at this as a place that we all need to have access to and to feel comfortable in, and that includes the young people who want to come to this area and feel comfortable as well. I'm not injecting politics here, but in watching the Democratic Convention, where the emphasis has been on inclusion, I think that this space here is very important from an inclusionary point of view. It's not going to meet everyone's desires and expectations in some areas or other, but I do feel very positive about the opportunities for the areas that are part of our public park. We have to recognize that there are two locations that are privately held. This has been a very unusual development from its beginning, and it's going to take all of us, including the developer, to make this miracle happen. I want to be sure that we're going to be hearing constant updates on this issue. We all have decisions to make in November. But it's going to take the city and the developer to push this into fruition, I believe. I am looking forward to the future of the updates as this begins to develop and coalesce. And I think also the comments that were made today about finding a way to make access constantly available throughout the long years of phasing in will be very critical. We want people to maintain their connection and their love for this location and for their support for continuing public access to the area. And I just want to leave my comments at that, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Jolin?
I will keep my comments very short because I know we're all ready. But to the development team, I think I really want to say you have done so much to dispel misinformation. So keep doing what you're doing. Still going to get what you're going to get. I've been here since the beginning, really supporting this project. In all of my work with developers in Baltimore City for the past 10 years, I think there's leading examples of what you guys are doing for the future, for what developers can do in the public realm, even when when you don't even have to. And so I think that is going to set a precedent for how we decide things in the future for these types of projects, when there's relationships that are happening in the public realm, outside the public realm. There are things that you don't have to do that you've been doing. And I think that's a great example today that we've seen with all the support and the people that have come from this day in the past year and a half that we've been together. So, thank you.
Thank you. And so lastly, before we close, just one more round of thank yous for our staff, Mr. Tiso, Antoine and Ren for your Caitlin for your excellent presentations, as well as Ren behind the scenes for working with all of our applicants and the architecture team, not just the Gensler team, but the various design professionals that come to the planning department for support. You guys do a great job. Couldn't do it without you. So thank you. And with that, everyone,